NBA Deeper Dive presented by none other than SuperDraft. Dave Lockren with me, Adam Sheriff, 4-game slates. Second time you're seeing us today. And second time we're going to touch on this slate, but we'll take a different approach. We've got some news, a few different angles to attack it from. What's up, man?
How's it going? Excited to go through this one again.
All right. SuperDraft, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. I've heard it once, I'll tell you again, because if you haven't signed up yet, you're doing it wrong. SuperDraft.io or download it in the App Store. Get $20 in free super cash when depositing $100 or more and using the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. No salaries, straight multipliers. For example, tonight you go in, you get an Anthony Davis spot up against the Golden State Warriors. No LeBron James. You're not getting anything extra from him. Right? You come in, you get Anthony Davis at 1x. So whatever he scores is exactly what you get. However, you want Sabonis? Well, 1.2x is what you get. 1.250 fantasy times 50 fantasy points if that's what he scores. Tobias Harris at 145, and then you get down into many of the cheaper guys that are going to really open things up, like Rajon Rondo 1.8x, Furkan Korkmaz 1.8x. Whoever you want, you can play them. Doesn't matter. You want to play everyone at the top, go for it. You want to get that value in there with high multipliers, do the same. The strategy is great. It's a lot of fun. And you get $20 in free super cash when you sign up and deposit $100 or more. So what is there to lose? Go to superdraft.io or download it in the App Store. All right, man. We got 4 games. And, a couple of them, I guess all of them have something to talk about, because on a slate like this, you have to pretty much turn over every stone. So we'll start with Philly and New York. This line's kind of been all over the place, but it's settled everywhere around 7 points. So Sixers without Joel Embiid, without Ben Simmons, big favorites here, but not as big as they should be. I guess, actually, Josh Richardson was asked what they needed to do differently, and he said heart, and then walked away. I'm not sure if you've ever seen the replacements, but Coach Jimmy McGinty, when they ask him, you know what I'm talking about?
I've seen the movie. I don't remember.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember the movie. I don't remember the quote.
That heart, miles and miles of heart, and then walked off the field, and then they ended up winning. But they've been in disarray away from home. They come back home. Now they're down. They're top. They're one, and they're first and second best player. It's probably going to be an ugly, low-scoring game, but there's just no way you can overlook this Sixers value, particularly on FanDuel where they're super cheap, but everyone's cheap on FanDuel. So we can talk about it on every site.
Yeah, obviously just a lot of the best plays on the slate are coming from this game, because you're missing Simmons, which opens up 38 to 40 minutes. You're missing Embiid, which opens up a ton of usage in addition to extra playing time for a couple of guys. So obviously a ton of value coming here. You look to Al Horford, who has not been very good this season, but still without Embiid on the floor has averaged over a fantasy point per minute, 20.9% usage rate, 12.5% rebounding percentage, assist percentage at 20% without Embiid, and the rebounding and assist numbers could tick up even a little bit more without Simmons. So despite his struggles, I think that Horford looks like one of the best values on the slate at a cheap price point. But then you also get Josh Richardson and Tobias Harris, who both should play big minutes. You get a nice usage bump for both of them without Embiid out there, and potentially a little bit more in the way of peripherals for them as well, since there's more rebounds to go around. You're going to be getting Harris at the 4 as opposed to the 3, potentially a little bit more in the way of assists for Richardson. So all 3 of those guys look like really good options, Horford being number 1 for me, but also getting to a lot of Harris and Richardson. Then you kind of get into trying to guess at how Brett Brown's rotation is going to go. You have Shake Milton coming off of a 37-minute game. I'm assuming he starts in place of Simmons again. He's my favorite out of the non-Horford, Harris, Richardson guys, just because I think that he plays the most minutes and he produces at a similar rate to all the other guys. So I think he looks pretty good. Then you're kind of just guessing between Alec Burks, Furkan Korkmaz, if you need to go deeper.
Ownership on this Sixers team is concentrated between the obvious picks here, like Al Horford at his price point. He's down at $5,200 on DraftKings, 52% ownership. On FanDuel, Al Horford 4,800, 41% projected ownership right there. A little bit different because of the power forward position, and there actually being some good power forward options on this slate. We'll get to all of them in a bit, but I think the low ownership on some of these other guys has to at least be considered. Specifically, guys like Korkmaz. Could Brett Brown give him 30 minutes? I think he could. Do I have confidence that he will? No, but on a 4-game slate, on a team with their 2 best players sidelined, and guys like Richardson really not showing much, Tobias Harris being a remarkably streaky player, and Al Horford looking like a shell of himself, regardless of Embiid's status. I think Korkmaz is somebody that if he ends up getting 30 minutes, which is possible, and has shot well enough, is a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy with these 2 guys off the floor. It could be someone at very low ownership that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. The same goes for Burks, where if they just get more minutes than you're expecting, they should be productive, especially because if they play more than 20 in Burks' case, like 22 to 24 minutes, or in Korkmaz's case, more than like 24 to 26 minutes, it probably means that they're playing really well. So you do get that working in your favor if you roster them. Still, neither one of them is going to be a core play for me, whereas guys like Horford, Harris, and Richardson all are.
Okay, let's talk. Drill down a little bit more on Shake Milton here. How many minutes are you giving him?
I have him at 32.
Is that enough?
Yeah, I'm getting right now on DraftKings. We have him projected at about 15% ownership. In the crunch I did before the show, I got to about 20%. So a little bit over the field on him. He's not a great per minute guy, but he's not bad either. And it is a good matchup. He does see his usage rate rise up above 20% without Embiid. So, I think that he should have opportunities here. And the fact that he is priced so close to guys like Burks and Korkmaz and doesn't have tons of ownership makes me just prefer him over those guys, since I do think he gets more minutes.
Anything else for the Sixers?
Norvell Pell is in. I've seen some talk about Kyle O'Quinn today. Pell being active makes me think that O'Quinn probably doesn't play.
Yeah, I don't see any way that he does. I mean, it's possible maybe Pell doesn't, but Brett Brown's clearly favored Norvell Pell over O'Quinn when they've been healthy. So I guess we'll see. Neither of them would really warrant enough anyway. Maybe they both play, I don't know, 7 minutes at backup run at center. It's not going to be enough. Let's talk about the New York Knicks. Not a whole lot to get into here, but we can start with Julius Randle. You and I discussed it earlier this morning. Only 25 minutes yesterday, playing the second of a back-to-back today, along with the Sixers. But that was Bobby Portis was also playing really well, and you would think it was just a spot where the hot hand got the opportunity in the loss. I don't know. It's hard to believe that this will be another instance where Julius Randle sees limited run.
Yeah, you kind of just have to assume that he plays his normal around 34 minutes. The Knicks are just one of those teams where for the rest of the season, you're not going to be really confident in rotations because they're not playing for anything. Eventually, you would think they start giving more minutes to their young guys, but they, for whatever reason, really haven't been interested in that this year. And so, they're just one of those teams where it's not going to take much for a rotation to go sideways any given night. But more often than not, you still expect Randle to be playing around 34 minutes. He's up around a 30% usage rate without Marcus Morris on the floor. So I think that he's the most appealing Knicks player on the slate.
Do you have any interest outside of Julius Randle? We know that Frank Ntilikina is out. Aside from that, though, there isn't a whole lot going on with the New York Knicks today. And this team has kind of devolved into once in a while you get a decent game from RJ Barrett. Julius Randle really feels like the only guy night to night who you can have any faith in whatsoever, unless several players are hurt.
Yeah, there's nothing else that really stands out. I mean, Elfrid Payton lost some playing time last game to foul trouble. I do think that if he stays out of foul trouble, you get 30 to 32 minutes from him. But he's priced up to 7K on DraftKings, so it's still really tough to get to any of him. We only have him projected at 2% ownership. That's about what I got in my 150 lineups I made before the show. So it doesn't really seem that appealing. Obviously, if you want to take, low owned or low percentile shots on guys like Bobby Portis or Mitchell Robinson, I think it's fine. We have seen 26 and 30 minutes from Robinson in the last 2 games, but his playing time, as usual, all over the place. And you just have really good high percentage plays at that price point. So it's tough to get to a whole lot of him either.
Okay. Is that it for the Knicks for you?
Yeah, I don't really have much of anything except Randall.
Let's talk about the Pacers and the Portland Trailblazers. Pacers laying 10 points here. I think we mentioned it before, but every game here has at least 7-point spread or higher. So nothing expected to be all that close. Although I wouldn't be surprised to see the Kings and Thunder keep it competitive. With Damian Lillard out, Pacers playing significantly better basketball lately. This could be a game that gets out of hand rather quickly. And honestly, the Victor Oladipo being out does nothing to dissuade me from thinking that would be the case. But anyway, sorry, what's that?
You mean being in?
Oh, in. I'm sorry. Yeah, Victor Oladipo being in or out wouldn't have made a difference, is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
His status. Yeah. We saw it the other day against what? I know Charlotte's a worse basketball team than Portland, but Oladipo was out and they won by 40 or something. I don't think he's played. He's a good player. He hasn't played well enough late or since returning to put a huge dent in really anything to make a big difference. So it obviously changes up this rotation though. So we'll talk about that. It would have been Holiday. It would have been TJ McConnell getting some extra run. Jeremy Lamb is out for the season with that ACL. So, that plays a small role here. And Victor Oladipo, since the All-Star break, is supposedly off the minutes limit. But I don't know if that's even the case now that he was just suffered a back injury. So maybe he comes back and plays 25 minutes today. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that Oladipo's price on DraftKings is pretty prohibitive at 6,200. On FanDuel at 4,800, it's a lot easier to get there. But as you mentioned before, and as we mentioned a lot, there's just also a lot of mispriced guys on FanDuel. So even if I look at the shooting guard position, I have Oladipo as like the number 5 or 6 option at the position. So, still not really loving him regardless. It is a decent matchup. But as far as Indiana goes, I think that there are some guys that you can get to as lower owned, kind of high upside plays in tournaments because they're in a good spot against Portland. But I think that because of all the value coming out of Philadelphia, because you have a lot of value on the Lakers, naturally you're going to get ownership a little bit lower on Indiana. For example, you only have right now 10% ownership on TJ Warren on DraftKings at 6K. He's certainly not a lock to pay that off, but he has a 23% usage rate in the games he's played with Oladipo this year. He's playing huge minutes, and Jeremy Lamb being out should help to solidify that. I think you get 35, 36 minutes from him, assuming that the Blazers are able to stay in this game. So Warren is, I think, a high upside tournament pivot that you can get to. He's only 5,600 on FanDuel as well, which is a really good price point. You mentioned on the show this morning that Brogdon's only 5,900 on FanDuel. That looks really good. On DraftKings, he's much less appealing, up over 7K. And then Sabonis also more appealing, I think, on FanDuel at 8,400 than he is on DraftKings at 9,100. We have him projected for a lot of ownership on DraftKings right now. And I don't think that it's not that I think he's a bad play. Like, he clearly has a really high ceiling. I have him projected in the mid 40s in DraftKings points, but with the amount of ownership he's getting in that price range, I would rather be getting to guys like Hassan Whiteside or CJ McCollum on the other side of this game. So that's kind of taking my exposure to Sabonis away.
Yeah, it's Sabonis right now. It's a tough spot because he's projected to get a lot of ownership, more than I initially suspected on DraftKings. Right now, he's at 31%. Let me refresh this to make sure there hasn't been a more recent update. It looks like there has, but okay, 29%. It's not crazy, but above 9K, that is pretty high. How much of that do you think has to do with there being a few very cheap options on this slate and people just basically jamming in Anthony Davis and another top priced guy that they can find?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a lot to do with it. And, Portland does only have a 104 team total here. So while I'm high on Whiteside and McCollum, I don't think it's crazy if other people say that they prefer Sabonis on, the side of this game that's favored by 10 points. So that's really McCollum and Whiteside right now are what's keeping me from getting to Sabonis because they're all basically the same price. So I think that, it's reasonable for someone to argue that they think Sabonis is a little bit better.
Okay. Miles Turner, get a little bit deeper into this one. If you're getting the blocks, you're probably going to feel pretty good about it. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed because his rebounding's been better lately, but still at the center position. A lot of this we said today, but has been lackluster at best for his career, not just this year. And the playing time you would hope continues to stay above 30 minutes. It's tough to say, but I'm projecting him for 31 here. They got smoked by Toronto and by like 46 or something crazy. And then they blew out Charlotte by 39. So my assumption is that Turner gets back to those minutes. $5,200 on DraftKings, where you can play multiple centers if you want, does make him a little bit interesting. Is it enough for you to consider Miles Turner at 52 on DraftKings and on FanDuel at 6,000, where of course you can only play one of them?
Much more appealing, I think, on DraftKings since you can roster multiple centers. On FanDuel, it's obviously a little bit harder. One thing, I guess, working in his favor on FanDuel, though, is that Al Horford is a power forward. So you're not costing yourself that. If I look at the center position on FanDuel, it's actually not a very good position today. Hassan Whiteside's the only center that I have better than Miles Turner, factoring in price. So I guess he's a fine option there too if you need the savings off of Whiteside.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the Pacers?
I don't think so. Oladipo coming back obviously takes minutes away from Aaron Holiday. So yeah, I think it's pretty much everything we covered.
Okay. Now Portland, no Dame Lillard. CJ McCollum's played really well, and you're going to have to pay quite a bit for him on DraftKings. FanDuel, I was surprised to see him still above. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I wasn't surprised. On FanDuel, CJ McCollum's 8,800. There's no surprises anymore when it comes to the pricing there, but he's dropped 50 plus in each game that Lillard's missed since departing with that injury, and he'll be out a couple more games. Now you got him as a pretty big dog on the road, starting. I think it's I wouldn't call it East Coast, the Midwest and East Coast road trip, but McCollum is projected right now on FanDuel for 25%. That is, I think, 9th or 10th highest. I'm sorry, on DraftKings. On FanDuel, McCollum at 8,800 is 30%. So he's going to be top 10, which isn't really that high given how small the slate is. What are we doing with McCollum here?
I'm rostering a lot of them. I mentioned when we talked about Sabonis that I'm high on McCollum. And, right now, looking at the DraftKings ownership, we have McCollum coming in a little bit lower owned than Whiteside and Sabonis. I actually have McCollum projected slightly ahead of those guys. And the reason really comes down to minutes for the most part. McCollum is playing at least 38 minutes in competitive games. 2 games ago, you saw him play 43 and a half in a game that came down to the wire. Last game, he sat the final few minutes of the game and still got to, I think it was 37 and a half minutes. Without Lillard on the floor this year, he's about a 1.2, 1.25 DraftKings point per minute player. If you go back the last 3 seasons and looked at games where Lillard has missed, you get 15 games of McCollum averaging about 1.25 fantasy points per minute, about a 33% usage rate, assist percentage up over 30%. So tons of opportunities for him and a ton of minutes. It's not a very appealing matchup against an Indiana team that is solid defensively and doesn't play at a fast pace. They rank 25th in pace since the start of January. They rank 13th in defensive rating. So it's not like it's an appealing matchup from that standpoint. And you see that reflected in the 104 team total for Portland. But this isn't a slate that has a ton of high scoring or they're expecting a ton of high scoring games or teams anyway. So it makes it a little bit easier to get there. And just the number of minutes that he plays makes him someone that I want to be getting into a lot of lineups.
How about Hassan Whiteside? He's been pretty popular recently, despite his price point being consistently at or above $9,000. You're paying a lot for Whiteside, but Terry Stotts has no problem giving him consistent minutes. I'll say this much though: since the start of February, he's averaging 1.17 DraftKings points per minute, which is down considerably from where he was early in the season. To you, is there anything to that? Is it just, some underwhelming play that should turn itself around, or just a couple games potentially? I think the big thing for me is it doesn't really matter because his minutes are up from where they were earlier this season. So it's going to balance itself out regardless if his per minute production's down. More minutes generally results in less efficiency anyway.
Yeah, I think I'm not too concerned about it. I mean, we have a really long track record of Whiteside being a very productive player, and the big thing for me is how many minutes he's playing too. As you mentioned, played about 36 minutes last game, despite losing a few minutes to blowout at the end. So if he's able to stay out of foul trouble and nothing really weird happens, you should expect 36 plus minutes from him again here. He's been around a 1.3 DraftKings point per minute guy this year, and it's not a good matchup against Indiana, but it's also not the best center position. As I mentioned on FanDuel, where you have guys like Al Horford at power forward, there's not a whole lot at center. And then on DraftKings, obviously you can roster two centers. You can roster Horford at power forward. So there's not as much opportunity cost there as usual either. Just looking at the positions, it makes sense because Golden State has Chris, but doesn't really have a center. The Lakers don't really have a center. Indiana has Turner, but like it's just not a slate where there's a ton of high upside center options. So I'm a little bit more willing to pay up for Whiteside.
Okay. So let's talk about some of these secondary guys. Carmelo Anthony, I think you're going to get one of these games soon where he does put it together. And I think you're getting the opportunity is so important every night, especially on a slate like this. If it's close, and right now you and I pretty much just have to assume that it will be, he's probably getting 36 minutes or so. I'll give him 30. I'll say 35, but he's going to play a lot. McCollum, Anthony, Whiteside, they're all playing a ton of minutes under Terry Stotts. With Lillard in or out, doesn't really matter. You probably get 30 plus again from Gary Trent. And then Anthony Simons has kind of been relegated to a smaller role off the bench. But what are we doing with Melo here against Indy?
I think the salaries.
Talk for a second.
What'd you say?
Keep talking for a second. Okay.
I think the salary is just a little bit lower on him than it should be. He's obviously a really frustrating player at a roster. And again, it's not a favorable spot for the Blazers, but he does see an uptick in his usage rate without Lillard on the floor. And that's a big deal, at least for his ceiling. His per minute production increases about 1/10 of a point. So it's not a huge increase there. And that's because he's not an efficient scorer, but he does become the second option offensively when Lillard's not on the floor. You see his usage rate go from about 20.5 or 21% up to 26 to 27%. And so it gives him the higher ceiling there. He obviously loses rebounds to Hassan Whiteside at times, but there are other games where he runs into a lot of rebounds pretty quickly. So the opportunities are certainly there. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to score. He's going to play big minutes. He's only 5,600 on DraftKings and 5,900 on FanDuel at small forward. So I think that, despite the tough matchup, despite the fact that he's not that good, I think that it's still someone where I'm coming in right around the field or a little bit over. We have him projected on DraftKings for 18% ownership. Right now I have about 22%. So it just seems like a good value where he's playing enough minutes that it's kind of tough for him to disappoint at that price.
Anybody else for Portland?
No, I don't really think so. I mean, you saw a big game for Trevor Ariza. We've seen some big games from Gary Trent. The minutes are going to be there for those guys. So with it being a 4-game slate, that would be the argument if you wanted to go to them. They shouldn't get as much ownership as guys like McCollum, Whiteside, and Melo, and you should still get 34 to 36 minutes from Trent. You should get probably more than 36 minutes from Ariza. The problem is just that they're still both, on average, like 2/3 of a fantasy point per minute players in a matchup where they should produce at a below average rate. And there's a million good value plays on this slate that are actually in good spots and that look really good. So outside of just, kind of hoping to run hot with 37 minutes of a lower owned guy on a 4-game slate, I don't really see a whole lot of merit.
It's really hard to justify somebody like these cheap Portland values today, because what's the best they're giving you against the Pacers? Like you said, maybe you run hot with the playing time and get a lot of minutes, but even so, what's Gary Trent giving you? 0.6 fantasy points per minute on average? Nothing impressive.
Right. Like if you go back and look, I mean, there was at least one game where Gary Trent just went absolutely nuts, but I think he had like 5 steals and shot like 5 of 8 from 3.
Yeah, he had like 4 steals in the first quarter. Something ridiculous. Something never going to happen again.
Right. And the takeaway there is what we both just said. It's whenever you have someone playing this many minutes, they can get lucky and run into a bunch of stats and win you a tournament any given night.
Right.
But if it's still a very low probability play. And even though there's only 4 games today, I think there's enough value, enough ways that you can get creative within a lineup that I don't really think I need to be getting to him all that much.
All right. 2 up, 2 down. OKC, Sacramento. Another game. Well, all 4 of them really separated by quite a bit of points. Sacramento Kings 7.5-point dogs, 221 total here. By the way, the highest total on the slate is at 222. This one's the second highest at 221. So nothing really jumps off the page at you, which means that we're going to have to cover everything just as much as we always do. The OKC Thunder, starting it off with the backcourt. You've got Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander around the same price. Dennis Schroeder seems to be the best in terms of the discount that you're getting on him. Hopefully he sees 30 plus minutes. He's coming off a 32-minute game against Chicago, game in which Chicago came back from a huge deficit and actually almost won. I don't know what to make of Dennis Schroeder, but I do know this. He's the type of guy for me that ownership plays pretty heavily into it. If he's going to be entirely overlooked at a cheap price point, then I'm more than willing to take some shots. Otherwise, not really. 20% today, he's still coming in as a relatively popular option. I don't dislike him, but it does put him in a spot where I don't feel like I need to load up on Dennis Schroeder either. What are you thinking here with the backcourt?
I think I'm going to get to a lot of Schroeder.
Okay.
20% obviously is decent ownership, but it is only a 4-game slate. I think he does look like one of the better values. He, in competitive games, is typically going to play 30 to 32 minutes, especially against smaller teams. And we know that the Kings are probably going to close with either whichever point guard is in, Fox or Joseph. Fox is questionable for this game, but you're probably going to get, Bogdanovich, Hield, Bazemore, at least 2, maybe 3 of those guys. It shouldn't really be that difficult for OKC to go with Gilgeous-Alexander, Paul, and Schroeder in their closing lineup. So I'm expecting another 30 to 32 minutes from him. And at only 5,500, he projects for, like a 5.5x, almost 6x play on average. Over the last couple of months in games that Chris Paul has played, still a 25.9% usage rate, 21.3% assist percentage. So he looks like a really good value. He looks like the top guy to me from the Thunder. You can still get to guys like Chris Paul and Gilgeous-Alexander as secondary options, but they're getting some ownership as well. And there's just players on the slate that I like a little bit more at their salaries. The other spot to point out, he was really popular last slate. He was like 18% owned, scored 7 fantasy points in 20 minutes. But Nerlens Noel for the season is right around a fantasy point per minute. He typically is going to split 40. He's going to play whatever Steven Adams doesn't play at center, which typically is going to put him in the 16 to 18 minute range. And at 3,300 on a slate where the opportunity cost at center isn't that high, I think that he's a decent guy to take a shot on in tournaments, especially if he's projected for low ownership, because he projects as a decent point per dollar option as is. But if you get, foul trouble or blowout or whatever, and Adams loses some minutes, it's not that difficult for Noel to be someone that really helps you.
Danilo Gallinari, $6,300 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Gallinari coming in at $5,700. So he's definitely discounted. And he had a real opportunity to drop his first 50 fantasy point game of the season the other night. That did not come to fruition because he pulled a Houdini, completely disappeared in the second half. I mean, he was nowhere to be found. He had 21 real points at halftime, 24 by the end of the game. Pretty incredible stuff, as a matter of fact. 8 for 16 shooting. You know what you're getting from Gallinari most nights. It felt like he didn't that night, but then he ended up being like, oh, okay, I knew what I was getting. He just tricked me for a moment. He's not ever really gonna make or break a slate for you. He could be a good filler, and especially at a small forward position that can be weak at times when you get him at a discount. Sure, that's not bad. What's interesting though is both of these teams play at a bottom 10 pace, right? The Kings play at the 20 or the 6th slowest pace. OKC at the 7th slowest pace, basically identical. So if this wasn't a 4-game slate, this might be one of those games, Adam, where, and there's 1 or 2 guys I don't mind, but this might be one of those games where, as we call a Manny special, is not really appealing at all.
Yeah, obviously I agree with you on Gallinari. We talked about it before that his range of outcomes really isn't that wide. I think he's a better play on FanDuel at 5,700.
Yeah, and with no positional flexibility, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, on DraftKings, I'm pretty much coming in right around the field. He's just, I think, priced where he should be given his lack of ceiling.
Do you have interest in anyone outside of the Schroeders and the Nerlens Noels for OKC?
coming in, it looks like underweight on the rest of the guys. Obviously with it being a 4-game slate, I'm going to get to some Chris Paul and some Gilgeous-Alexander. But they're projected for more ownership than I really think they should be getting right now.
Okay, so let's turn the page to the Sacramento Kings. I actually want to start in the front court with Harry Giles. There was a minute there where Luke Walton was more than willing to run Nemanja Bjelica at the 5 for a lot of minutes, and that hasn't been the case lately. Harry Giles actually seeing quality run. Now, if you look at the last game on the 25th against the Golden State Warriors, Harry Giles did not close it out. Bogdanovich and Barnes did close it out alongside De'Aaron Fox and Kent Bazemore. So it actually wasn't Bjelica that was getting that additional run. Now, he played, I believe, let's see here. Trying to figure out how many center minutes he got. I think it was around like 8, but he didn't close. Neither did Giles. Bazemore came in. Granted, they pulled away from him. They end up beating him by 18 points. But I do think you can look at Giles and say, yeah, I could see him getting 27, 26 minutes today. And I guess the question here is he, oh, and by the way, he also had 3 fouls in the first half. So he came out early from that one. That's worth considering as well. Is Giles at his current price point a complete stay away for you on a abbreviated slate? He's 45 on FanDuel, power forward, 55 on DraftKings, which is a lot.
Right. I mean, I think he's more appealing on FanDuel because he's a power forward at 4,500. But again, looking at that position, I still have him behind a lot of guys. So yeah, I have him as the 5th power forward on FanDuel. So it's not a bad play there, but there's still guys ahead of him. On DraftKings, I think it's really tough to get there because it's not like it's an appealing matchup against OKC. And, I do expect him to play 26 to 28 minutes, somewhere in there. But there's just a lot of guys I think they're in better spots at his price range. He is coming in at low ownership, which is appealing, but I'm not really that interested in him at that price tag.
How about De'Aaron Fox? Right now with Fox, you're getting ownership. Not insane at all. I mean, on DraftKings, he's at what, 9%, 10%, 10% ownership right now. On FanDuel, where he's 76 on DraftKings, on FanDuel he's 75, 15%. So not a great matchup. And you had mentioned on the strategy show that you wonder if he's playing hurt. I don't know. Maybe you're right. He's actually not shooting that poorly. He just hasn't been all that effective. Is Fox worth it when we talk about low ownership on a very small slate where that may be the difference between winning and losing?
Well, and also questionable for tonight's game. So be sure to keep an eye out for his status. But it looks like his ownership plays a really big role for me in how much I get. Earlier in the day, we had him projected up at 20, 22%, and I was only coming in around 10%. Now that we have him at 10%, I'm getting like 20. And so what that tells me is pretty much that I have him as a pretty neutral play in the context of the entire slate. And that I really just think that, if the field wants to play him, I can find options that are just as good. But if people are going to shy away, then he's a good guy to play at low ownership. So obviously the biggest thing will be his health, but I think that it's a tough matchup against the Thunder, but he's a little bit underpriced for someone that averages 1.15 DraftKings points per minute. And if he's in, should play, 32 to 34 minutes.
I currently have him projected in. The good news is it's an 8 p.m. 7 p.m. would be ideal, but it's an 8 p.m. game. There's only one 7 p.m. game, so it shouldn't be that hard to make adjustments if you do have him in lineups. The players priced around them, though, on DraftKings, if you did happen to throw him in the utility spot, Tobias Harris would already have locked. You can go to and let me get your take on this, because if people are looking at Fox and saying, all right, no one's going to roster him because his ownership should be low or because he's questionable and he hasn't been great lately. Let's assume he is out. You have Gilgeous-Alexander at 7,400. Fox is 76, by the way. And I'm just going to name guards here. Malcolm Brogdon, also an 8 p.m. tip at 73. Andrew Wiggins at 72 has small shooting guard eligibility. And then really anybody else around them. We'll stick with guards because then it starts to get a little bit to be too much. Chris Paul's at 7,900 as well.
Yeah, it's not going to be a problem outside of being annoying to get off of him, because you do have Gilgeous-Alexander healed, in this game. You mentioned the other guys in the later games. Also, like Bogdan Bogdanovic would get a huge bump if De'Aaron Fox is out. He's a cheaper guard, so you'll want ideally to be like late swap optimizer and Fantasy Cruncher, using that on your lineup so that you can drop to like Bogdan Bogdanovic or get to some Corey Joseph value and then, upgrade other positions. But if we were to get, like last minute news that he's out or something like that, and you're really in a crunch, it's not like you're just going to have to eat it. There's a million guys that you could last second global swap to if you need to.
How are you feeling about the Buddy Hields of this world? You just mentioned that he could be a viable swap. Um, Harry Giles, I agree with you entirely. It's tough at that price. He does feel like the type of guy that's going to explode at some point because he is a +1 per minute guy. This probably isn't the matchup though, and I'm with you there. Do we have interest in anybody else on this Sacramento team?
It really depends on Fox, because if he's out, obviously you're getting a lot of minutes, or you would expect to get a lot of minutes for a $3,300 or $3,100 Corey Joseph. Bogdan Bogdanovic goes from really not getting many opportunities at all playing alongside Fox to being a very productive player without Fox on the floor. So he would be the guy that I think gets the biggest bump in terms of production. This season, he's played 768 minutes without Fox. He's averaged 0.98 DraftKings points per minute, whereas when Fox is on the floor, he has averaged 0.73 DraftKings points per minute. So a huge difference for him. Hield, I think, would get more playing time if Fox is out. It doesn't have a big impact on his rates, but you'd get more playing time there. The one other thing to point out is that, talked about Nerlens Noel and the value that he brings, because if Adams gets in a little bit of foul trouble or something weird happens, he's a fantasy point per minute guy that is really cheap. Same goes for Alex Len, who is slowly having his minutes ramped up, it sounds like. But he played 16 and 15 minutes. Last game, though, against the Warriors, the Kings closed small. Here, I expect him to play a center for 48 or close to 48 minutes. So I think it's possible you get, 18, 19 minutes from Alex Len.
Okay. Last time Fox was out, Corey Joseph started, and he was out for a while earlier in the season. But the last time he was out, which is a little bit more recently, Corey Joseph played 33 minutes. What would you be projecting him for in the event that Fox does sit?
Yeah, 32, 33.
Okay.
Minutes.
And of all of the value that we're gonna have, right? Rajon Rondo, some of these Philly guys, can't say how excited you should be about them, but many of them are cheap. Where would Joseph fall into the mix for you in terms of priority?
I would still rather have Rondo just because he's the better per minute
I don't think
guy.
that's even close. Honestly.
Yeah, it's not. Joseph is more of like I don't know if filler is the right word, but it's someone that I'm still not excited about. Like, he's played 1,147 minutes without De'Aaron Fox this year. He's averaged 0.64 DraftKings points per minute. If you take
very good.
Right. So if you just take that as the average, give him 32 minutes, you're looking at like a 20 fantasy point projection. And that's without accounting for the fact that it's not a great matchup against the Thunder. So it's not someone that I'd be excited about rostering, but it is certainly someone that you can use if, it helps you get to, I don't know, Davis, McCollum, Whiteside, or something like that.
You're trying to catch lightning in a bottle there. But I would also imagine that this is what's interesting. If Fox is out and then you already have Rondo, I would imagine you're going to see a ton of very similar lineups that start with Rondo, Anthony Davis, and then Corey Joseph, and then probably Al Horford, right? And then and then probably force in another one of these top price guys because they'll fit pretty easily on this slate. Do you see that being the case if De'Aaron Fox is out?
I think I think it's definitely possible. I'm not sure how necessary Joseph will be. I do think, though, that if Fox sits, the guy that I really want to get to is Bogdan Bogdanovic.
100%. For a while there, when Fox was out, and Bogdanovic got the start later on towards that Fox injury, he clearly wasn't healthy. Talking about Bogdanovic, maybe that was after Fox. No. It was with him returning. He played really underwhelming basketball, but he's looked a little bit better lately. And something that Bogdanovic is clearly your best playmaker. There's no question. I mean, Buddy Hield is not the type of guy for the job. good enough player, good shooter, but never somebody that you can consistently rely on to move the ball, bring the ball up the court, and kind of initiate the offense. So in the event that Fox is out, I agree. Bogdanovich is the guy. Buddy Hield, though, what makes him more appealing is he is really cheap. Like 6,100 on Buddy Hield. If Fox, he probably plays 35 minutes and, easy 25+% usage guy in that situation is also worth considering. So you want to move on to the last one here?
Yep.
All right. Hey, a couple of things before we do. If you haven't signed up for Awesemo premium membership yet, you could get 50% off your first month by using the sign-up code Deeper Dive, one word, all one word. Deeper Dive gets you 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus Platinum membership. That's the ownership projections, player projections, the boom or bust tool. Wait till baseball comes out. You got the top stack tool and so much more. All of these developed and used by Awesemo himself, the number one ranked player in the world. You know him as Alex Baker. All of our premium articles, the lineup builder, the fantasy cruncher add-on, we've got it all. And it's not just for basketball or baseball or football or hockey. We have PGA, the best PGA content out there. NASCAR, MMA, you name it, we've got it. Hell, we have great XFL content as well. So any sport you want to play, we've got content for it. We've got projections for almost all of them, ownership projections for almost all of them. Use that promo code Deeper Dive, one word. It'll get you 50% off your first week. And if you go to awesemo.com/join, scroll to the bottom, you'll see videos on all of our most popular tools. So you know what you're getting before you open up your wallet. Want you to feel comfortable if you are going to become a subscriber. And that's the best way to do it. Familiarize yourself with what you're getting first. And when you do decide to do it and jump in, use the promo code Deeper Dive upon checkout and come say what's up in our premium Slack chat when you join. All right. Golden State, LA Lakers. This one, unlikely to stay close. Lakers laying 10 points on the road, 222 total. It's the highest. So we had a question here. If Fox sits, do you think Joseph or Hield starts? I would be shocked if Joseph didn't start.
Yeah, I think it's Joseph.
But we'll see.
I think Hield gets more minutes, but I think Joseph.
Oh, yeah. It definitely gets more run. But Hield, I would expect Joseph to start. It's an 8:00 game, so only one game will be in action by that point anyway. Anyway, 222 total. Lakers had the highest implied total on the slate. But let's get Golden State out of the way first, Adam. And you know what? How about this? Start it with wherever you want, because what a mess this Warriors team is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just going to be a nightmare. It's another one of those really bad teams that they're playing a lot of guys. They're trying to see what they have in some future guys, but then you still have Andrew Wiggins. You still have Draymond Green, who's available to play. You have Marquise Chris. But none of the pricing really seems that appealing when you consider how deep the rotation is likely to be. They also signed Miles Mulder to a 10-day contract. He's available to play tonight. I don't know who that is, but it is another body that Steve Kerr can use. It's a pretty unappealing team. You have a $5,500 Draymond Green on DraftKings projected for a pretty decent amount of ownership. And, I think that it makes sense because he's 5,500. He probably plays 28 to 30 minutes. At the same time, I don't really feel like I need to be getting over the field there, just because I think that, it would be surprising if he plays like really big minutes here or anything like that. And he's not the greatest per minute producer. It's not a great matchup. But as far as Golden State guys go, I think him and Wiggins are the two most appealing. I just don't think that either one is that appealing.
Is that the sum total of your Golden State analysis?
The only player that I have projected for more than 30 minutes is Andrew Wiggins. So yes.
And Andrew Wiggins just has been wholly unappealing since he came to Golden State.
His rates with the Warriors are really weird. He only has a 25% usage rate.
I know.
And I don't expect it to continue to be that low. If I projected him with his actual rates that he's had so far, he would only project for like 30 fantasy points. I have him at 35 DraftKings points using more along the lines of his rates from Minnesota, because I don't think his usage should be going down with Golden State. But, it's still a tough matchup. It's still a pretty mediocre price point. It's still a terrible team facing the Lakers. Yeah, I'll just find other guys.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who had 0 rebounds and 1 assist in 31 minutes last time out. That's really tough to do.
But Steve Kerr says he's picked up the offense as quick as anyone he's ever seen.
I bet he has. Oh man. I've said it a million times. I think Wiggins needs to be the number 2 on a team, or he's just going to be pretty stagnant.
I mean, we even saw it with Towns this year. He was
that's what I'm referring to.
Right.
Yeah. It was shockingly evident.
He struggled with inefficiency in a big way when he was still playing alongside guys like Jeff Teague and Robert Covington. Now he's playing alongside Jordan Poole and Eric Paschall and Kai Bowman.
Damian Lee.
Draymond Green. Like I don't think the efficiency is coming back anytime soon.
And let's just for a moment talk about Draymond Green. By the way, Live Before Lock coming up next, taking you up till 7. You've got Eddie Fear and Chris Spags. Also, we've got some free content. I just wanted to make sure I had that pulled up to let you guys know where you can look for this free content at Awesemo.com. The NHL live blog and Awesemo's game plan live stream that already happened, but I believe you can go back and check that out free at Awesemo.com today on the site. Draymond Green is the worst type of player that you want on a team that doesn't have any good scores, because he's never going to get that done. And then it's going to affect him as a facilitator. Rebounding has been modest, but not good enough to kind of overshadow the other blemishes. And another thing too, is this is somebody who for several years we really relied on to give us the stocks, the steals and the blocks. And that was, he was one of these 5x5 guys where, 5 rebounds, 5 points, 5 assists, 5 blocks, 5 steals. If he did that, you wouldn't have been surprised at all. And, now things are different, and it's clearly affected him. He's averaging decent block and steal totals, and similar to where it was the past few years, his steals are down, but his point totals since last year and now this year are heinous. His rebounding is down. Assist rate is down. I mean, what silver lining is there with Draymond Green right now, outside of the fact that he is getting very cheap? But can you even rely on his minutes? He's going to be the first guy that Steve Kerr pulls if this game gets even slightly out of hand.
Right. I'm a little concerned about that too. I mean, I have him at 29 minutes. The only real saving grace you can point to for Green is that he is cheap. He should lead the team in assists. Like he should get those opportunities, whether the Warriors
should.
Right. Whether the Warriors can convert on them in a tough matchup as a whole, is the question. But on DraftKings, he also has guard and small forward eligibility, which makes it a little bit easier to get him into lineups. But it's still not that appealing. Like on FanDuel, he's pretty cheap too at 5,800. But I have like 6 power forwards ahead of him, including a $4,300 Eric Paschall by a little bit when you factor in salary. So just a secondary play that seems like he's getting enough ownership where he's not that appealing.
Okay. How about, and I just want to make sure we hit on everything. What are your thoughts on Damian Lee here coming into a spot where he's been pretty, I'm not going to say he's been good, but he's had opportunities to be more impactful. He's averaging right around the fantasy point per minute since the trade deadline. The problem I have with him, though, is at this price, it's tough to get on board with a 20% usage guy who doesn't really provide a whole lot of consistent peripheral production either.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at too. He should play 30 to 32 minutes. He's not super expensive, but I just keep coming back to it being, for one, a really deep rotation where it's not like it's surprising if it goes sideways and something weird happens and you lose a couple minutes from anyone, including Lee. But also a tough matchup, not a high usage guy. And no, it's not like there's a lack of plays at this price point, going across multiple teams and multiple positions. There's a lot of guys here. I'd rather roster Schroeder. I'd rather roster Milton for a little bit less. I'd rather roster even Draymond Green on the same team. But you potentially have Bogdan Bogdanovic at that price point too. There's just no real shortage of plays here.
All right, let's close it out with the Lakers. Good amount to talk about here. LeBron James out for this one. We'll start with Anthony Davis. No surprise here. Anthony Davis is going to be chalk across the board. 42% right now on FanDuel. That's second highest projected ownership of any player, second only to his teammate Rajon Rondo. 48% on DraftKings, and Rondo, he's third. Rondo is first. We'll get to Rondo after this, but Anthony Davis, I'm actually surprised to see that it's not higher, just given how easy it's going to be to pay for him today.
It should be higher. It's really easy to pay for him. There's nothing to dislike. I mean, you can say all you want about maybe the Lakers blow Golden State out, but you're talking about a Lakers team that doesn't have LeBron James. It's pretty tough for me to think they'd blow Golden State out to the point that Anthony Davis loses minutes on the backs of Rajon Rondo, Danny Green, and Avery Bradley. So I think if this game gets out of hand, it's probably because Davis is having a monster game. He's averaged 1.58 DraftKings points per minute without LeBron on the floor this year. Has a 34.5% usage rate, which is up from 28 to 29%. His rebounding percentage jumps to 15.5%. Assist percentage jumps to 18%. There's just nothing for me to dislike about Davis.
There really is. There's not even an ample amount of analysis needed here either. No. You just play him, and if he sucks, well, it's not like you made the wrong decision. Right. I don't know. It's just it's tough to get away from. It's nearly impossible, especially because he's so easy to roster. We'll get to Rondo. I want to ask you a couple quick questions we got from our premium Slack chat. We answered the Fox and Healed one. I'll get to Kuzma in a second. If you're fading one of the mega chalk guys, which one would you say it's best to fade to get contrarian, Adam?
Are we talking about Rondo, Horford, and Davis? I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right. So assuming by mega chalk, you mean the three guys that are above 45%, I guess you could, yeah. I'm
not fading any of them.
I wouldn't either. I don't think it's necessary.
Like all three of them in the lineups I made before the show, I have more than 85% of all of them.
It's really tough to get away from that. So
tonight's the perfect example of you need contrarian lineups, not insane contrarian stance.
And it doesn't have to, yeah, exactly. It's a good example of a lineup where there's one guy that crushes that's 1% owned, and that's the difference between everything else.
Right. Like I would rather have Rondo, Horford, Davis everywhere and be taking shots on guys like Alex Len, Nerlens Noel, Kyle Kuzma,
Furkan Korkmaz.
Yeah, exactly. Like these, and that's not to say that I need 20% of any of those guys, but just mixing and matching those guys in, because I think that Rondo, Horford, and Davis are such high probability plays that I think that gives me a better chance than saying, oh, well, let me just hope that one of them right.
And if one of them sucks, you're willing to eat that because it's the right decision. Really
and they're all just so cheap. We're not talking about guys that are priced even remotely close to where they should be for their circumstances.
Would you set any groups for the Kings if Fox is out from Rano on Slack?
If Fox is out, probably not. I think that because Joseph is cheap enough. The thing is that Bogdanovich and Joseph are so cheap where I don't really care if I get them in the same lineup. I guess maybe you could do max 2 out of Healed. Yeah, I don't think I would end up setting any rules, especially because it's a 4-game slate.
Let's talk about, I'll let you hit Rondo, and then we'll talk about Kyle Kuzma and the rest of this team to close out the show. And by the way, if you guys enjoy it, hit us with that thumbs up. It's the easiest way to help support the show. And as always, appreciate you making Awesemo.com and all of our shows part of your daily routine. Glad to have you hang out with us every day. So, Adam, Rajon Rondo is wildly popular today. 86% right now on DraftKings, 48% on FanDuel. So DraftKings is where he's ridiculously the Jakob Poeltl thing didn't exactly play out well for a lot of people yesterday. What is your answer to people who are saying, yeah, but what if Rondo doesn't start and I get burned again? You may think it's a dumb question, but just put yourself in the people's shoes who were burned. Maybe they're a little bit newer to this and they're not used to taking such hard hits like that with a guy that was recommended by everybody to play him.
It's not a dumb question at all because the Lakers have enough guys.
Good, because I made it up.
It's an insanely dumb question, but no, no. I mean, the thing is, like, it's not dumb. Like, we don't know for sure he's going to start. All that we have to go on is that LeBron's missed 2 games this year, and Rondo has started both of them, and that typically he's LeBron's backup. But it's not like it would be the craziest thing if they were like, oh, Alex Caruso is starting. But the thing is, obviously on FanDuel, you kind of just have to go with it and hope that they do what they've done previously. But on DraftKings, if you get news at 9:30 or whatever that Caruso is starting, he's $100 less than Rondo. Bradley's cheaper than Rondo. So you have, Quinn Cook is cheaper than Rondo. Like, anyone that is starting over Rondo is less expensive. So or any of the guards. So it's really easy to just swap him.
It is. It really is. And I guess we don't need to talk about playing him or not. I don't even want to take that time up, right? Like,
I don't feel the need to tell everyone that a 1 fantasy point per minute guy playing 28 plus minutes is a really good play at minimum salary.
Yeah, well said. Close it out. And to answer the question on Kuzma, which you, Josh, and myself were actually discussing prior to going live tonight, this is one of the more interesting questions on the slate that could have a pretty big impact.
Yeah, I think that I'm not confident in Kuzma, but he only played 14 or 15 minutes last game. It happened to be Markieff Morris playing as well, joining the team. But it's just one of those situations where I think going forward, it would be really surprising if Kuzma is just suddenly a 14 or 15 minute per game guy, especially in games where LeBron doesn't play, where you need more scoring. You have 36 minutes opening up, and obviously, yes, some are going to Rondo, some going to Caruso, but you should, I think, be able to get minutes for Kuzma. And one thing that was positive from the last game, even though he didn't play that many minutes, was we saw lineups we saw them play Anthony Davis, Markieff Morris, and Kyle Kuzma alongside each other. So, I think that projecting like 20 to 22 minutes for Kuzma is pretty reasonable. It wouldn't be shocking to me if he played a little bit more. It wouldn't, I guess, shock me if he played less either, but I would lean towards thinking he gets at least like 22 minutes here. And his salary is really cheap. The usage rate goes up without LeBron, as you would expect. So I think that Kuzma, especially if he's not going to get much ownership, and right now we have him at 9% on DraftKings, I think that's a pretty high upside spot to take some shots in tournaments. Anybody else here you want to get to for the Lakers? Yeah, Danny Green, KCP, Avery Bradley, all really cheap. Minutes, are obviously kind of dependent on game flow and how they're playing, but they're all cheap enough where I set a rule to only get at most 2 of those guys. You can include Markieff Morris there too at 3,100, but I think that in a good matchup, with a 117 team total and LeBron's usage missing, I think that they all look like decent values that you can kind of just mix and match. All right. Anything else here before we get out of here? Nope. That'll do it. Thanks for hanging out as always. Good luck tonight. Stick around. Live Before Lock with Eddie Fear, Chris Baggs coming up next.
starting up now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Awesemo.com live before lock show. Got ourselves 4 games today, and I'm joined once again by a man who's going to help us navigate that as best I can, who I'll introduce in 1 second. But more importantly, I'm Chris Spags, and the other guy on the other side right here, your favorite Fast Eddie Fear, who I have not done a show with in a while. So good to see you here, Eddie.
It's great to be here as always. Good to see your smiling face and your various friends wandering in the background.
Yeah, the dog's decided to go for a little lap here. Right, appropriate timing. Thankfully, not going. Actually, no, she's going to go to the water because she knows what I like to hear. But in terms of background noise, but Eddie, I know one thing you like to hear is about the future of DFS over at SuperDraft.io, and of course, they are the presenting sponsor of this show, as well as many of the others, including my short form video, The Four Corners. But of course, they are more importantly offering you great deposit bonuses right now. If you go to superdraft.io and use the promo code Awesemo10, get $10 free without any deposit at all. Don't even have to put any money at all. Just sign up your account and use that promo code to give you $10 free. If you deposit under $100, they're giving you 20. Over 100, they're giving you 30. So a lot of ways to build your bankroll there at SuperDraft. And big benefit of SuperDraft, besides a lot of overlay on there recently. We talk about it a lot on our shows. They've had tournaments that have needed to fill recently with big prizes up top that have not quite filled. More importantly, you can pick any player you want on there. The flexibility in building your lineups is the main thing with their multiplier format. Any guys you want in there you can go with. Is a normal slate lock there, 7 p.m. Eastern. So get in right now at superdraft.io and use that promo code Awesemo10. $10 with no deposit, $20 with deposit of less than 100, and $30 with a deposit of $100 or more. Let's go check them out and play for yourself, really, because a lot of people have been winning money on there, and the overlay has been out of control. And Eddie, real fast, because I always have such a beautiful, salient way of putting these things. What is the value of people going to a new site like SuperDraft? Bit of a new frontier, but also one that's offering overlay and deposit bonuses.
Yeah, as you said, there's the direct financial benefit, but then there's also being ahead of the curve. I worked in game design for a good decade before I got into fantasy sports, and there's your early adapters tend to be people who just are a step ahead of the curve, and it's a slightly different process than fantasy sports is. Most of us are used to it. So yet another benefit is you can just be sort of a step ahead. You'll be a little more in tune with the ownership, the various nuances of the site, and so I think that's yet another benefit.
Yes, go check them out again, superdraft.io, and the promo code when you are creating your account to use on there is Awesemo10, Awesemo10. One other plug real fast, check out the pin tweet on @Awesemo_com. We're doing a big giveaway right now for all of our podcast listeners. If you give us a rating and a review, a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, you're entered to win a free month of Awesemo Plus. We're giving them away every single day. So check out the pin tweet right now on @Awesemo_com. And whenever there isn't any content on the YouTube channel, there is some on the podcast feed. They can't take us down there on like those bastards at YouTube. So go check out, I shouldn't say that while we're on YouTube, they're going to take us down. But either way, go to Apple Podcasts, check out the Awesemo feed, and check out the pin tweet on @Awesemo_com to see how you can win that free month for just giving us a little rating review, helping us out. All right, Eddie, let's talk the slate here. I'm curious your thoughts on one man only right now. I want to know how you feel about Rajon Rondo. Yesterday, I heard you and Josh talking. You vocalized some of your concerns for Jakob Poeltl. Did end up being right there as Jakob Poeltl didn't pick up the start. Thankfully, I global swapped over to Lonnie Walker, which bailed out a lot of lineups there. But frustrating situation. Seems like not the case today with Rondo, where he's been the direct backup for LeBron, has also started for him in the 2 games LeBron has missed. How are you feeling about Rondo? Is he a famous Eddie Fear windmill slam dunk kind of play today or no?
I feel better about him than I did about Poeltl yesterday, and I felt pretty good about Poeltl. I did a pretty good, pretty deep dive, as we say around these parts, on Jake Puddle, and I think I was still conservative relative to other people. I spent a lot of time talking about, the ways it could go wrong, and that I thought if it went wrong, it would be because he did get pumped. And in the last game Aldridge had sat, which was against the Jazz, where he thought they'd want a traditional big man, he didn't play that much. And then I did not think not starting playing 10 minutes was a likely scenario yesterday, but I was pretty hammering hard on 75, 80% ownership, which is what it was most of the day. Even with him being announced out, several minutes before lock, he still held 60-something%. So Rondo, the difference is it's really hard for them. Now, let me rephrase. They could run the offense and run this team without Rondo, but they need someone who's going to handle the ball. So maybe Quinn Cook randomly starts. I'd be pretty shocked to see that. Maybe Alex Caruso starts. That's not impossible. I still consider it unlikely. but I think the predominant likelihood is that Rondo starts, and at that point, I have him at 30 minutes, which I think is about right, but there's even beyond that, and he's productive enough of a fantasy guy that he feels pretty good at that number. Like, we have him at 70% right now on DraftKings. That's higher than I would go, because I think there are some other fairly compelling value plays and not such a plethora of price up options that you have to get there. And I would say, comparing Rondo to Pirtle again, that Rondo's ability to be ineffective in his time on the court is probably slightly higher. Now, it's harder for him to be ineffective than he has been in his normal role with this team because of the fact that he's got to do the primary ball handling. As has been much alluded to today, there's been 2 games that LeBron has missed so far this year. Anthony Davis also missed one of those, but in each of those games, Rondo picked up the start, picked up significant minutes, and more importantly, dominated the ball. Had the ball on every possession, brought the ball up almost every time, went back and watched each of those games. I would say that his star is a little bit less bright than it was looking at these games each a couple months ago, and Caruso is gaining some appeal. So I think one of the reasons I have him at only 30 minutes, where in each of those games, if they had remained close, he would have played well in excess of that, is I think you could get a different minute split there. But I don't think, I think Vogel does what most coaches do, which is maintains their second unit integrity and basically leaves Caruso in his role, letting Rondo run the show there. So I would probably still come in under 70%, because I like differing from massive chalk whenever possible, but it's not an unreasonable number on its face. I think the predominant likelihood, again, is he plays, 30 minutes-ish. And now, again, if you're playing on a site with late swap, please pay close attention, but I presume he will start, and if and when he does, that's perfectly fine chalk. I don't have a giant issue with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on it, and I'm erring on the side of going more with him. I'm more close to the 100% way.
Box is out, so that's
okay.
An
So
interesting wrinkle to this conversation.
Yeah, let's segue over to that in a second. I'm sure you want to do some updating of ranks, so I'll fill the air for a moment.
That's a good idea. Let's do that.
So Rondo, to me, I think the issue that I have in getting away from him is that I've been trying to incorporate more target scores. A lot of the guys here that I do trust. So for the record, Awesemo, I feel like I said during his game plan streams, he's not as big on that. But Josh, Adam, I know use target scores. I've been trying to be more mindful of that moving forward. And for me, Rondo projects, just the actual median projection for him on a permanent basis when accounting for his rates without LeBron, slight uptick in usage for him, 44% assist rate in court time without LeBron. Does seem to me like if we're going to say he's got those 30 minutes, which is also what Awesemo has him at, I do think that he's already above the target score. So I find it hard to get away from that. But
how many fantasy points does he have him projected for? Because I have him at 31.5, I think. I'm kind of curious where Alex comes in on him.
Let's see. He's got him at 34.4. So right there where you would expect. And I would have his target score at about 29. So I think that's a pretty substantial uptick here. And I just don't see, if he's starting, again, that's really the big thing. And I think every logical reason, you probably might have said the same thing yesterday about Pirtle, though I think a little bit less securely. Rondo just seems like he has to start here for the reasons that Eddie mentioned. So I'm comfortable with that. If I have to swap to an Avery Bradley, if Rondo somehow doesn't start, I'm willing to take that loss today, or take that, that pivot today. But for me, I'm going heavy on Rondo. I'm just treating it like he's a free square today, like many people will. But, we've seen how that's gone south before, so I don't mind that. I have a question for you, though, Eddie, before we talk about the De'Aaron Fox situation. If you were going to not play Rondo, what would you do to try to get leverage on the field? Would you go to a Caruso, or would you just pay up heavily at point guard and get away from the lineup build completely?
Well, it would depend why and when. So if I did it because Caruso was starting, yes, I'd just probably immediately pivot that exposure into some Alex Caruso time. But I don't think if it's just I'm not playing Rondo with the information we have at hand right now, I can't think of any one particular spot I'd necessarily want to get to if it's just in a vacuum. I think there are a lot of pretty compelling plays that are still, even just looking at value plays that you can get to just on that team. You're going to get some immediate leverage if you go to one of their triumvirate of shooting guards, basically, whether or not you play Avery Bradley or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope or Danny Green, all of which are eligible and all of which are a couple $100 more, but not any discernible amount. I probably have Green lowest of those because they end up being fairly close to interchangeable. He's the best player by a nod, even sort of for fantasy purposes, but they end up being largely interchangeable where they will get 24, 26, 28, 31 minutes, depending how well they're playing. This last game, Avery Bradley was horrible and was 0 for 7 or 0 for 8 from the field. And Danny Green got there with, took 10 shots, was very efficient, got a couple steals and a block, had a very good Danny Green-esque game. It's not that much more likely out of him than other guys. Even staying on this team, Kyle Kuzma would have a lot of appeal for me. I like Kyle Kuzma anyway if he's sitting at like 10% ownership. The downside is you don't get the minutes. And that's a real concern because this is basically the point guard out for the Lakers is really the situation and the distribution. But if you go back and look at the 2 previous LeBron missing games, admittedly a couple months ago, and again, one of those, Anthony Davis was out as well. He jacked up 1 million shots, and he was my favorite play going into each of those games alongside Rondo. It's complicated now because you have Markieff Morris in town, but he has started to pick up more time at the 3. So if you're trying to figure out what to do with, LeBron's 35, 36 minutes, I do think, likely somewhere to the order of, 15 of those land on Rajon Rondo's head, but the rest are going to go somewhere, and a good chunk of them could go on to Kyle Kuzma. And if he's sitting at 10% owned, he will jack up a very, very significant number of shots given the situation. Even in this last game, it was depressing. He only played 12 minutes. He took 10 shots. It still didn't hit a score you'd be happy with, but the matchup is obviously wonderful. And, him playing 22 minutes and getting to, 33, 34 fantasy points. So I'd probably end up being closer to 20% on Kyle Kuzma than the 10 we're seeing most places. He is one of the guys in this situation I would rather overweight on. But if you're getting away from Rondo, I think distributing among the other 4 Lakers in that price range is a pretty decent idea. And I don't have a massive preference of those guys. I probably have Danny Green at the bottom because I expect him to be the highest owned of those other 4 guys.
Okay, so anybody else? I mean, should we talk AD or do you want to go over to the Kings situation first? Because I think AD, to me, he gets another usage bump as well, about 35% usage for him without LeBron on the year. Price works. I think he would have been a viable play even if LeBron were in, but he's a guy that, to me, I just want him in more lineups than not. But value-wise, certainly a different situation. But I guess you have any quick thoughts on AD or any reason already to get away from him? Or is he maybe less appealing than I'm making him out to be?
I've been tinkering with an ownership model. On DraftKings, I had him at 57%. Right now, the Awesemo projections have him at a little bit over 50%. I think both those numbers are a touch low. I think closer to 60 or something would be better. Obviously, that is a heck of a lot of chalk, but there's no reason not to expect him to be the highest scoring player on the evening by a pretty significant margin. There is a ton of value. There are not a ton of good spend-up options. So I think that number should be higher. I could throw all the statistics out, but largely we should expect him to play in this game for as long as it is competitive and, really be averaging somewhere in the 1.6, 1.7 fantasy points per minute. And that's just going to math into a very, very nice play at their price. They're not on a back-to-back, so they have no reason to particularly save him. This game is in Golden State, which is fairly relevant for me when looking at the likelihood of a blowout. This is the 3rd meeting this year between the Lakers and Golden State, and the Lakers beat the crap out of them in LA. But when they played in Golden State, it was a 5-point game. It went all the way down to the end. Anthony Davis was very good with LeBron in that game. Unsurprisingly, it's a very strong matchup for him. I have no reason to get away from Anthony Davis. And Anthony Davis, without LeBron James there, spending a lot of time alongside, especially if, Kuzma's on the bench, you could catch 30 shots out of Anthony Davis. Like, there's a 100 fantasy point game out of Anthony Davis is not out of play tonight, which is rarely the situation these days. You need, unencumbered Harden, unencumbered Russell Westbrook, something like that, where other stars are out. But we've seen Anthony Davis. I think he's actually surpassed 100 DK points once, if memory serves, but he's been well into the 90s many times, if not you could really very possibly get that tonight. So the combination of all those various factors, I would probably be a little over on that. And then we can go talk about the Kings a bit if you want.
I guess, well, before we move on to the Kings fully, because I just feel like it's worth addressing because you talked about keeping the game close for Golden State. I mean, I'm getting some Warriors in lineups. I'm certainly not going on my way to make sure I'm getting them because I think if the Lakers did somehow blow them out, I actually do agree with you. I do think there's a higher chance of that one being close because of it being in the Bay Area. But I think even if they did get a blowout, Anthony Davis would still be a very large contributor to that situation. But are you running it back with any Warriors? Or any of them jumping out to you as somebody you'd be like, if you want to feel more comfortable or just try to get the rising tide along with it? Or is it just no Warriors that you feel need to put in with Lakers?
Well, no, I mean, I would. It's a 4-game slate. You're going to. So talking about the slate for a second, obviously there's pretty significant lines on each of these games. The combination of that plus the relatively few number of games on the slate would lead me to be more interested in stacking games. Again, I think game stacking in MLB is usually a pretty specious strategy. That's not really the way the sport works, but the fewer games that are on the slate, the better idea it is, and the greater likelihood of those games blowing out, the better idea that is. So a 4-game slate with significant lines on every game, that's a pretty appealing strategy for me. So, that being said, you're going to have plenty of Lakers. So putting together a lineup focusing on this game, I don't find crazy. And some of the guys on Golden State are fairly well priced to hit some sort of GPP upside. Wiggins is, I guess, the first one you would want to talk about there. 7,200, I think 74 on FanDuel. Those are very tolerable numbers. Pretty amusingly, before their last game, I said, I haven't been able to watch as much Golden State basketball as I've wanted to since the break, but I'm curious whether or not Andrew Wiggins' additional peripherals have something to do with being in a better system. He's been, stuck in the Great White North forever. I wonder if, being on a Steve Kerr team, a team that's got a bit more of an identity on both ends of the court, will lead to him continually getting more rebounds, assists, steals, blocks than we've seen previously, because the numbers were significant. You were starting to look at a 4 or 5 game sample. And then last game he had like 16 points and an assist. I think he had literally like 1 non-point statistic. So maybe I was right originally and nothing has changed there, but I have to still do a little bit deeper of a dive there. But regardless, if this game is going to be close, he still has a very significant upside. There is no one else on that team who is a significant offensive weapon. So I do think him smashing that price is possible, and that price isn't intolerable. So especially on a short slate, he was my best ranked Warrior with a B in cash and an A in tournaments. Beyond that, there's a number of guys here I kind of support taking shots at. I don't mind Poole, Lee, Green, or even Marquise Chris. Now, it's not a matchup you would look at and think, I want to take some centers against LA, but they've been getting a little more easily worked on that end over the last month or two than the beginning of the season. Some of this is their relatively older personnel and all of those 3 guys who eat most of those center minutes wearing down a little bit. I don't think it's crazy to think that Anthony Davis may have to spend a little more attention on the offensive end of the court. So that could take it down a little bit. But also that previous game in the Bay Area that I was referring to a minute ago, he had a really, really solid game, and they left him out there quite a while. I don't have the box in front of me, but he played some 30 minutes and had I think like a 20-10 game. Like, he had a very good fantasy game. The price isn't thrilling, but I'd have a couple shares of Marquise Chris, and I would try to locate them in the games where I had a lot of Lakers. Again, I think you'll have a lot of Lakers in every lineup. I think the Lakers and the 76ers are obviously very significant priorities. I would have an average of 5+ probably. I think greater than, if I built 150 lineups, I think my average number of players from those two teams would be right around 5.
So just to close the loop on the boxer, because I also very much support Marquise Chris today. 45 fantasy points in a game against the Lakers earlier this month, played 27 minutes, shot 12 for 15, probably not happening again, but at his price point and under 10% ownership, I think he's a guy who's going to have a hard time killing you. I do think he has the upside to get there and do more.
I mean, I think he can kill you. He's $6,000. Like,
he's pretty consistent and productive this year. I mean, like, yeah, maybe he doesn't spike a big upside, but if he gets you a different line of construction, he gives you, let's say, 30 fantasy points. I don't think that kills you on this slate. As long as
30 won't kill you. I just think a 20-minute, 22 fantasy point game out of him wouldn't shock me. You have Looney in and healthy again. You have Draymond in and healthy again, who maybe ends up playing center and they push small. Like, I can think of ways it doesn't work out, is what I'm saying. But I did want to specifically state that I like him more than you would generically think when you look at this game and look at the Lakers. Jordan Poole's pretty close to a cash play now. Like, he's been really consistent. His role is get him, 12, 14 shots, somewhere around 30 fantasy points. I think he's 46 on FanDuel. He's 49 on DK. He projects as point per dollar, probably the best guy on this team. I don't know how much upside is there. I really don't like the matchup, even without LeBron, whose regular season defense is a movable feast, to be sure. It's still not a good matchup against a pretty potent defense top to bottom. More time for Kuzma helps with that. More time for Rondo certainly helps with that. But, Jordan Poole is a guy I would end up probably having in the largest amount of lineups. He would probably be the most owned Warrior for me. And I don't think he's completely out of the realm of possibility in cash. I don't think you get there just because there's so much good value that paying up to near $5,000 for him doesn't make sense. But he projects pretty good at $5,000. And then Draymond, is expected to carry some pretty significant ownership into the 20s. I'm fine with that. It's nominal. I have him as a C in cash and an A in tournaments. $5,500 Draymond can just fall backwards into 40 fantasy points and do really well at that price with some combination of 6 stocks or 13 rebounds or 9 assists. Him being back makes it a little dicey for Juan Toscano-Anderson, who I ranked but not highly, Kai Bowman, who I ranked but not highly, Eric Pascal, who I ranked but not highly. I would have shares of all those players, but tough matchup, and Draymond being back muddies the waters a little bit, and Wiggins being there and commanding enough of the usage. Certainly not a high priority for me to get to the Warriors, but the guys I mentioned, I'd have some.
All right, let's jump over to Sacramento now, because this is going to be another key building block for today's lineups that you're making today. And of course, also the Sixers. We'll talk about them in a second, but this Kings news is relatively hot off the presses.
Is Portis starting? Someone's yelling that in chat.
Is he? Let's see. Taj Gibson questionable. Yeah, Bobby Portis will start ahead of Taj Gibson on Thursday.
Wow. All right, now it's a party.
So so it looks like, I was wondering why he jumped up in Awesemo's value rankings, but yeah, he looks like a very strong value play on the sites today. Bobby Portis says. We can go to that in a second, but so let's talk Kings. Corey Joseph now looks like a very strong value play with not a lot of actual raw points, just under a 21 raw point projection for Awesemo on Draftkings for Corey Joseph, but he's almost minimum price. So you can see taking that stab, but the guy who I imagine I'll get a lot more of now is Bogdan Bogdanovic. I was already getting him. I think his usage does take a big enough jump here. He gets to 23.8% without De'Aaron Fox, 25% assist rate without Fox, which I do think is going to help him out the most here. And just not having a guy dominating the ball next to him quite as much, it's going to make him pop a lot for me. How are you feeling about the Kings here? Do you agree that Bogdan's a guy? Are you Buddy Hield? Are you willing to go to Corey Joseph? Because do you feel like historically you've not been the hugest Kojo guy, but maybe a minimum price will change that for you?
Yeah, it always is going to come down to ownership. There was, a Corey Joseph day earlier this year where he was 70% owned, where we knew he was starting and was going to play 30 odd minutes. And that was, and he was the mega chalk. And I thought that was a horrific idea. My takes on this are going to completely come down to whatever our final ownership is. So I almost want to punt it for 15 minutes to figure it out. Because if we're at 57% Rondo and 26% Corey Joseph, I'd be like, I'll still take Rondo. Like at that point, I'll still take Rajon Rondo. If we're at 64% Rondo and 12% Corey Joseph, like there is an appropriate equilibrium between those two players. But, Kojo is now going to project for me something like, I think 32 minutes and somewhere in the area of 21 to 22 fantasy points, which at $3,100 is perfectly compelling. And Rondo does have a big floor, so that could be the pivot that gets you there. But not a good matchup whatsoever. I do think Bogdanovic and Hield are the guys that I immediately get the most interest in on that team. Points per dollar, I would prefer to go to Bogdanovic. His, points per production increase, sans De'Aaron Fox, is a little bit tied to some unsustainable production where when Fox isn't out, his shooting percentage goes up by what is a specious figure. There's been a couple games where Fox didn't play and he went out and shot 8 for 12, and then there was a 9 for 11 game, and that isn't going to stick. But it is the spot I like the most. So again, this will come down to ownership, but points per dollar. The guy you would want now would be, DK 5,200 for Bogdan. Feels pretty good, but it is an ugly matchup and one I am to some degree concerned about. This is the third and final, I would think, meeting for Sacramento and Oklahoma City this year. They've played twice previously. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure those are the conferences that only have a 3 matchup this year. So I don't think they play again. But it's been 2 fairly ugly games. The first one was both teams under 100, if memory serves, and the other one, OKC blew them out by 20, which, a little bit of a concern here. So I would not want to overreact to this news. Sixers starting Milton Richardson, Glenn Robinson III. So time to change some rankings again. I assumed that spot would go to Matisse Thybulle. Would not have been a Giant fan anyway. We can get there in a second. But so they're starting the guys we thought they were, but instead of Korkmaz, who I would have said second most likely, and Thybulle, who I would have said most likely, they're going to start Little Dog, Glenn Robinson III. He's getting in there. Yippee. It doesn't actually change a ton, but
you want to just jump to the Sixers then, because I do feel like we've kind of established Bogdan, and we can talk about the ownership for the Sixers when that does come.
Let's see other things on the Kings. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out at center again. A couple games ago we had a pure center split between Harry Giles III and Alex Len, where they chopped it up basically 32-16. Last game we got some more Bjelica back at center. I probably need to upgrade Bjelica a little bit. I like him a bit now. You're going to get a couple extra shots out of him. And last game, he again played some 5-6 minutes at center. So, if he's going to continue to hold that role and Fox being out, that's another guy I would want to increase my shares of a little bit. So we'll look at our ownership when it comes up. But that's another guy I'm keeping an eye on. And then also don't completely sleep on Kent Bazemore. If you're looking at the sort of also-rans on this team in Portland, where you end up frequently looking at Bazemore and Ariza. I would have preferred Ariza before this news. It may now be Bazemore for me. I'd have to reproject it, but it'd be close now.
All right, so let's talk about the Sixers, because I'm curious your thoughts on, particularly on Al Horford. So I have some concerns. He played 34 minutes last night. Sure. I thought he was actually a candidate maybe just to get sat here. I know the Sixers need the win, but it's a lot of minutes on Al Horford, a guy who they previously have rested on some back-to-backs. Yeah. But he projects really well for Awesemo. If you adjust his rates for court time without Simmons and Embiid, it's a gigantic boost in assists, a 30% assist rate. Also gets a little more usage, rebounds. It's everything you'd expect with both Simmons and Embiid off the floor. Awesemo has him projected for 39 fantasy points, which even more aggressive than the 37.8 I have him for. And I'm inclined to trust the boss man here, but I do have those caveats, those concerns. Tobias Harris also looks good. Shake Milton also should get a boost. Josh Richardson also getting a usage boost as well, with just a lot more to go around without Embiid out there in addition to Simmons. Which Sixers are you prioritizing, and do you trust a very, very, very chalky Al Horford?
Trust is an interesting word. I would say I don't trust it, but I still think it is priced so well it's difficult to move away from it. Sure. I have him at 38 fantasy points. So you're talking about a guy who is 52, 53 on DraftKings. I think he's 4,800 on power forward on FanDuel. Someone who projects into using the poor vernacular 8X is really, really difficult to move away from. I might add, Bobby Portis starting at center is not going to hurt him any either. So, what inclination I might have had to go somewhere else is rapidly fading. I do think your 34 minutes is a point. I do think they'd be interested in getting him out of there as soon as possible. Obviously, they don't want to overwork him. They're home here, so I think there's a reasonable chance that they do take care of business. Though I should say this game has, I think, 7-8 point line, or maybe more. I can't remember. But if it comes anywhere close to that, it'll be the biggest blowout of the year, because this is their fourth meeting, and I think the biggest margin of victory in the first three was 6.
It's a 7-point spread right now, at least.
7-point spread, yeah. I mean, that would be which is simply long way around of saying this team has played them fairly tight. And, you're now missing Simmons and Embiid. So, again, I think a 7-point line sounds about right, but no reason to assume that stuff gets squirrely there. So, Yeah, I like all the 76ers starters except for Glenn quite a bit. Shake Milton, played 37 minutes last night or something to that extent.
In the second half, he played 19 too. So
yeah. So I think I have him at 34, but I have him playing 34 minutes against the Knicks. He costs $4,300 or $4,700. Can't not like that. I would rather play Josh Richardson at $5,200. I think my ceiling is a little bit better there. I like his individual matchup a little bit more. So Josh Richardson, more of a priority for me than him. I absolutely love Al Horford, who should be able to do anything he wants to with Portis out there. Like, dear Lord, that's going to be a snuff film. I don't even want to watch that game now. It's going to be unfair. But and then Tobias Harris, I have taken 24 some odd shots tonight. So really hard to imagine that he doesn't get their paces and everything in the world. But yeah, there's just when you take Simmons and Embiid off a team, not unlike when you take, Luka and Kristaps or any of the other, multiple big man pairings we've lost, you get, you take Westbrook and Harden and Capella off and you get Eric Gordon scoring 50 real points against Utah. So there's just so much usage to go around and no one costs that much. I don't know who's most underpriced, but yeah, I really like those 4 players. Now, that said, the rest of the team is fugly. I really don't have a great read on what they're going to do, and they don't stick. It's sort of like with the Spurs. The whole Jakob Poeltl thing, I went through and did literally an hour on figuring out what was going to happen with Jakob Poeltl and was 100% wrong. I went back and watched the previous games of Dallas and the previous games of that Aldridge, and I put so much time into it and just they went another way. And with the multiple interchangeable wings here filling that 5th spot, I'm really not sure what the hell is going to happen in the realm of Burks, Glenn, and so on. I imagine Horford plays entirely at center. I have him playing 34 minutes again at center. I imagine, though cannot confirm, that he is backed up by Norvell Pell and not Kyle O'Quinn. I rank them both on a 4-game slate. I would prefer Norvell Pell between the two, but not a priority for me. I think it is really worth looking at the Knicks. Their rotation yesterday was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. The only person to play 30 minutes was Mitch Robinson. You're not going to get that very frequently. At the end of the game, they went back to Harkless and didn't put Knox back in. Alonzo Trier played the last 16 minutes of the game. It was a truly bizarre rotational swap between them against Charlotte last night. You had they closed with Trier, Portis, which I suppose is good for him letting him tonight. You can look at that as sort of a build of confidence at the 4. Mitch. I'm trying to remember what else they did there. Elfrid Payton and Randall, I think, were the guys who closed out there. But I don't mind.
Did Randall close? I thought because his minutes were down a lot yesterday.
Maybe Randall. No, they closed. That's right. Randall didn't close. Harkless closed. It was Harkless. It's Harkless. Yeah, he played the weird minutes yesterday. It was Thank you. It was Harkless, Payton, Portis, Robinson, Trier. That was their closing 5. Almost all of whom played the entire 4th quarter. I think Harkless came in the middle, but all those other guys all played the entire 4th quarter in a really competitive game. Is the weird part. Like if they're up 19 or down, more likely 29, then I get it. It's just like, okay, we're trying something. I want to see these guys together. We're not going anywhere this year anyway. Maybe it's we want a better draft pick. We're trying to lose this game. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But point being, I'm having difficulty, projecting any sort of consistency on this team. Yesterday, Elf got the time you would expect out of him. He got into some fairly significant foul trouble, both in the second. I think he had 3 fouls and got pulled with like 3 minutes left in the second, and then got another foul at the start of the third. Yep. So his time was limited. I don't mind going back there. He only played 1 of the 3 previous games against Philly this year, but looked fine and able to handle the pressure. And it's worth pointing out that going out there against Shake Milton is a far easier task than going out there against Ben Simmons, who's been really sublime defensively this year. So, I probably in a tournament, if I have to play a Nick, I'm going to play Portis at this point because he's just underpriced and the upside is obviously Oten. But second one, it would probably be Elf. There's, Frankie Smokes is out. That's very relevant. He's got just DSJ behind him. I would not do so with any significant confidence, and it's not a priority for me. I would rather get to a couple shares of Brogdon. We could talk about it. Similar price on DK. The Brogdon very, very nicely priced on FanDuel, so that'd be more of a priority for me. But Elfrid Payton, I guess, would be Nick number 2 for me. It's really difficult in what's still not a good matchup to throw much confidence to these guys, but it's a 4-game slate. So probably Portis, Elf, and then, Mitchell Robinson again.
Are you getting any Randall, or are you worried about the minutes for him, given that he did get really squeezed out in a meaningful way last night?
I'm more worried about the matchup where he'll not get much defender bonus compared to some of these. I would absolutely have some Julius Randle. I ranked him perfectly reasonably based on the share. The fact that Taj Gibson isn't there does help him directly, because now they are starting Bobby Portis at center, which means Bobby Portis will play less, if any, at the 4, where he'd been backing up. So I like Randall quite a bit. I'm just quite a bit in the context of a 4-game slate, that is. But I would have him behind. He'd be my 4th guy to look at in a tournament here. The price isn't particularly brilliant. The matchup isn't particularly brilliant. I would probably have priority in tournaments of Portis, Payton, Mitch, Randall, I think is the order I would look at those guys.
Let's jump over to that Portland game, because I want to hit on that so we have some time to get to questions. And I'm actually curious your thoughts on CJ McCollum, who's just been doing it in the 3 games since Lillard went out, keeping a really high assist rate over 30%, also usage rate also above 30%, and really doing everything you'd hope from him. And he played a ton of minutes in that last game against Boston, even though the game was getting away from them. Still played 38 despite not closing that out for the last few.
He played 43 in the one before that, including every minute of the second half, I think. So that was actually scaling him back a little bit.
Got to rest him a little bit down the stretch. But I still like McCollum. I mean, the projections, if you set a projection, adjust the rates and all that.
I have him at 49. I still love McCollum.
Okay, tell me about it.
It's still an island game. Still, like, I mean, I have every single show since Lillard when I went, yep, he's still too cheap. Like, I have him projected still coming around, a projection, like an average of high 40s in fantasy points. So, a reasonable range to think in your head of 40 to 60, and 40 not killing you at a 9K price. And obviously 50, 60 feels pretty good. I like him a little more than Sabonis. I think he's going to be less owned than Sabonis. I have those guys. I actually think at their ownership, I'll have Whiteside a hair over McCollum, but I would rather play Whiteside and McCollum over Sabonis by a touch. No issue with, playing Sabonis, but I expect Turner to get his full time. Full disclosure, Sabonis triple-doubled the only other game they played this year, and that they will play against Portland. It's, again, obviously East-West. They only play one time, though Miles Turner and Malcolm Brogdon actually were out that game, if memory serves. So he started at center and obviously was the whole damn show. So, I think he's just great, and it's a 4-game slate. I'm not saying don't have significant amounts of Sabonis, but I'll check ownership again in a second and pivot to that. I'm updating another set of rankings, which facilitates the Knicks changes now. So,
again, you mentioned Malcolm Brogdon, and I guess I'm curious your thoughts here on just the whole situation with Indiana, getting Oladipo back in there.
Yep.
Brogdon I've been in on when Oladipo's been out the last few games, or last few games. I think Brogdon's still in play because of the matchup against Portland, but I just worry a little bit. I guess having Jeremy Lamb out of the mix entirely makes me feel a little more confident in Brogdon and Warren with what Oladipo takes away with his many, many missed shots. But how are you approaching that overall? Would you set a group for like Brogdon and Oladipo? Would you get Oladipo on DraftKings? Because he's one guy who's going to be completely unowned, and we've talked about it many times. He's just due for better days than he's had. He's shooting terribly from the floor, just 33% so far. Eventually, those shots are going to fall and go against a Portland team who really doesn't defend anything. I would think this could be a spot, but probably more inclined to think that on FanDuel. But how do you feel about Oladipo and this backcourt overall?
Yeah, I do think that he has to improve at some point, and you're not going to get a much better spot than Portland. Portland's really bad. I mean, they are a hair ahead of, Wizards, Hawks category, but their defense, especially adding Melo, having the consistent liability of having Whiteside out there, who strong statistically defensively, but has some issues. I would, I think your take is appropriate. I do think I would be more inclined towards, if you're telling me to put one of them in a lineup, I would rather play Broggy pants than get to Oladipo at their current prices on DraftKings. Even on FanDuel, probably, because they're both going to be very low owned for a slate this short. And Brogdon has actually looked good. Now, the production hasn't been there recently, but there was the game he lost minutes because they blew the hell out of Charlotte. There was the game he lost minutes because they got blown out by Toronto. He actually looks 100% to me. Oladipo just missed a couple other games, and there's a back thing going on, and around the same ownership, even though it's, I think, 62 versus 73 on DraftKings. Neither of those are good prices. FanDuel, it's 48 for Depot and 59, I think, for Brogdon. 59 for Brogdon on FanDuel is actually just straight up a good play. The other three are all a little bit specious. It's also not full minutes for Oladipo. He had only been getting 26, 28. Now he's back from this newest injury. Sumner is still out. Lamb is now done for the season. Maybe that continues to increase. Maybe you get 30-some minutes, but I still have him projected for 26 minutes tonight, knowing all that. And again, they have ample bodies behind. They have TJ McConnell behind. They have Justin Holiday behind. They have any number of guys to pick up some of that slack behind him. So I still think he's in the 20s in minutes. And for that reason, I really don't want to do 6,200 on DK. I ranked him. I would have a non-zero amount in 150 lineups, but non-zero means like 2. Right. I would probably get up to something like 15 Brogdon. I would rather go with that. It's very easy for me to see that working out. The Oladipo thing, you need a number of things to break your way.
Let's go back to Sacramento because I'm curious your thoughts now. We have some ownership in. It looks like Corey Joseph not taking the giant leap ups, 18% projected ownership for him. Rondo now down to 68%, rounded up 68%. Bogdan Bogdanovic, where did he land? And this is on DraftKings, by the way. So again, if you want all of our ownership projections for yourself, you're playing on any of the sites, use that promo code LiveBeforeLock at Awesemo.com/join to get half off your first week. Bogdan's still down at 12%, which I will have a lot more of that right now.
Yeah, I don't think, we missed obviously a gigantic swath of De'Aaron Fox earlier in the year, but in the last 2.5 months, he's missed a game or 2 games or something like that. So, and you haven't seen big Corey Joseph games. And again, that's not something he really does. This is a, 0.65, 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy. And again, the matchup is dicey. That split of 18 to 68 feels mathematically about correct, where it should be between him and Rondo. You're basically saying Rondo will outscore him 3 times out of 4. It's very similar to Pirtle and Biyombo from last night. It's very similar. You're dealing with more secure minutes probably for one guy, much lower production guy, but can occasionally hit an upside game. And there we were at 80-10, and I'm like, well, at that point, I'm just going to play Biyombo with 80% Jacob Pirtle. That was too big of a number. There were a number of pivots that made sense there. 68% Rondo is still a little higher than I would run, but it's not an unreasonable figure. So Corey Joseph, 18% feels good. If the number is 12% on Bogdan, yeah, I would want well more than that. That's at 5,200. That's a very, very strong play. I would probably convert some Josh Richardson ownership is what I would, if I had 150 lineups on FanDuel and DraftKings right now, I mentioned I would be turning a lot of Josh Richardson into Bogdan Bogdanovic. Josh Richardson, what do we have those two gentlemen owned at right this second?
Josh Richardson, we have at 24%, and also Buddy Hield, we have at 18.
And we have Bogdan at 12?
And Bogdan at 12, yeah.
12. Yeah, I'm still going to stick with, that's definitely Bogdan for me. Like I upgraded Hield to an A in GPPs. I think I may have had him at that originally due to the matchup, but the minutes have been, a real issue. 2 games ago, I did not rank him, and there's a question on the show like, hey, you forgot to rank Buddy Hield. I'm like, no, I want none. I literally do not want any of that. He had played 15 minutes, just not injury, just we're giving him 15 minutes. He didn't have a good game, and that's what they gave him. At this point, I do think the upside is there. That's enough usage gone that he can just, go hunt his, even in, I would have him projected now for probably 26.5 minutes is what I think that rotates out to for me. So still not super excited. But I straight up have a much cheaper Bogdan Bogdanovic projected for more fantasy points. So that's not even realm of close for me at this second. Again, I think Hield will outscore Bogdan Bogdanovic 4 times out of 10 right now is probably about the right number the way I have them projected. But Bogdan's $900 less and whatever 6-7% less owned. That's not close for me at this moment. So
you wouldn't have an issue playing both together, I presume.
Say again.
You wouldn't have an issue playing both Hield and Bogdanovich together, I presume.
No, I wouldn't have an issue playing. There's going to be a lot of trouble. Like I would have very broad groups, if any, on like the Lakers and the 76ers. And it would be something like no Norvell Pell and Kyle O'Quinn, and no Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, and not all 3 of Bradley, Green, and KCP, and not Rondo and Alex Caruso. But I would be pretty loose with the groups there. Both those teams just have very significant amounts of usage and time to make up. And I like the 76ers situation more, but the Lakers are even more egregiously underpriced for their situation. So,
all right, we got 9 minutes left to lock. Want to get some questions here, but quick alert for SuperDraft. Right now, there's going to be a lot of overlay and definitely no rake on SuperDraft's tournament tonight. Their jump shot.
They lock at 7?
They do lock at 7 today. So no extra half-hour show, but you know what? Because we are generous people, SuperDraft projections not free today, but here are the top 5 plays according to Awesemo right now. CJ McCollum, Al Horford, Anthony Davis, Rajon Rondo, Tobias Harris, and then some of the other guys we've talked about not far behind. Bogdanovich at a 1.75 multiplier, very much in play. But those are the guys. Put in a lineup right now. It's going to benefit you because there's a decent chance, no matter how your lineup does, you might end up cashing today on there. $6K up top in that tournament. So go to superdraft.io and use that promo code Awesemo10. Don't even have to deposit anything. We'll give you $10 just for signing up right now. If you use the promo code Awesemo10, you deposit under $100, you get $20 back. Over 100, you get 30 back. So go check them out right now at superdraft.io.
I want to bring up one other thing that this makes me like someone I already liked a ton and had as the best ranked player on his team pretty significantly, which is Dennis Schroeder. So again, third matchup for these two teams, and you got very good games out of Schroeder in the past, and that wasn't purely randomness. Setting aside that even based on his normal production in a vacuum or on a basketball court, that's an old one, he's the best price of the multiple viable guards on his team. It's a matchup where he already has been exceptional in the previous 2 games. He's already the best priced guy. And now moving Corey Joseph into the starting lineup helps him even more. I really want the bench guys because Corey Joseph is usually holding it down a lot of that defense. And one of the reasons you've gotten the big games out of Schroeder in the past is that Kojo ends up out there against him for significant portions of the game. And that's when he's done his damage because Kojo is usually sitting on either SGA or Chris Paul. And Schroeder gets out there dealing with Bogdanovich or other players. Again, it's the rotations were a little different at different times of the year. But Kojo moving to the starting lineup makes me like Dennis Schroeder even more. So the ownership there is a real question for me. What do we currently have this second? If you can refresh, DraftKings, Schroeder, Bogdanovich, and Josh Richardson.
So we just got an ownership update literally 2 minutes ago. So Schroeder is now over at 16%, Bogdanovich still at 12.9%. And who was the third one?
Josh Richardson.
Josh Richardson is now at 25%.
Yeah. I have those guys in a reasonably tight band. So because of that in a single lineup, I would probably play them inversely to that order of production. But raw points, I am still going to have Schroeder on top of those 3 guys. So cash there, I play Schroeder. Tournaments, I probably play Bogdan. But I probably have Bogdan, then Schroeder, then Jay Rich, who is in a very nice spot here against the Knicks. But I would have him projected a point or 2 lower. And I'm curious. I'm going to go look at Alex's projections. I don't do this often enough. I am curious where he has those gentlemen projected as of this second. I will share some numbers here.
You had Bogdan just a little bit lower than I would have thought. So I think that's probably
we have Schroeder at 30, which is, I believe I have him at 32, but that's in the realm of possibility. We have Richardson at 30. We literally have him 0.1 behind Schroeder. Alex has him. I have Josh Richardson 0.03 different from Alex. I have him at 30.25. Alex has him at 30.22. So we'll split the difference and say it's going to be 30.235. But Schroeder, I have, a point and a half higher than him. So I have him a little bit higher. And then Bogdan, I don't think we have a point less than that. So again, we have them all in the same narrow margin, but I would have them at this point Schroeder on top probably. But I really like all those plays for low to mid fives. And again, we're explaining they're all projected in the 30 fantasy point range. That's a very nice average projection for a player in that price range.
I'm actually looking at my projections. I have Schroeder at 31.3, Bogdan at 31.3, and then Richardson at 31.2. So for me, that's remarkably close. And I'll have more of Richardson and
remarkably close for anyone. And I nuanced mine and just redid my rotations and my minutes. And again, I have Schroeder on the other two by a point, but a point they're being made. And I expect that ownership to be about correct. I think that is very good ownership. So yeah, for me, I will, that's how I'm looking at it.
All right, let's take some questions here. Unless there's anybody else at all that you haven't talked about that you feel
there was a super chat someone sent in that said, what do I feel about Mitch Robinson at 1.8x on SuperDraft? I think it's probably a very strong tournament play. Again, I'm guessing the ownership will be fairly low, but Portis moving into the starting lineup, really does give you a much better chance that he gets out there and gets his 30 whatever minutes again. So I think you're in good shape with that.
Here's one general question, which you could just answer quickly, but you mentioned a lot about adjusting your bankrolls for different slates. And somebody asked a little bit longer ago, so you're probably locked in either way. But Eddie mentions playing less when the edges less. Would today be one of those days for you? Would you have played less today or more?
I would put today, again, I would have very few less days. I think I would generally have, and I did generally have a standard amount, which you then ramp up when you feel you are advantaged. And I think it's important to have a practice process for doing that ramping up as efficiently as possible. I'm going to put more entries in this. Here's how I'm going to double the entries. I'm going to create new entries. I'm going to just throw in a million 50-50s. What is the quickest way for you to get more money out there when you think it's very advantageous for you to do so? I would say this is an under average edge day. I have, guys here I like 3% more than this, 3% less than that. Nothing here feels particularly egregious. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I feel like I know everything and you all are fools lining up to give me your money, and 1 being like I feel like there's no edge, I think we're sitting at a 3. I think Bogdan feels like sort of an edge case. It feels more to the random than the skill right now. So.
All right. What do you guys think of Bogdan on SuperDraft, the 1.75x multiplier? Keegster asked. I think we're on the same page then. I would like him a lot more there. Still, according to Awesemo's SuperDraft projections, not in the top 10, but I think just outside.
Yeah, I mean, how many of Awesemo's top 10 SuperDraft projections have 60 or more modified fantasy points? Because 1.75, if we're all projecting him for 30 or 31, if I'm doing the math right in my head, that's going to give you 53 or so, which to me is usable in a tournament. And I even think 30 is a little low. I had him at 31 and some change. So my answer would be I probably like him a lot, much like Mitch Robinson, who I imagine has a modified number very close to that range now.
Yeah, it's a high modifier number. It's still not as high as Rondo is at 1.9 overall, but Mitchell Robinson is at 1.8. So that's a couple plays there at the higher level. Bunch of either ors here.
I think Portis, by the way, is very good. Okay, I have to rank him at his possibility of getting minutes and his very cheap price as being a strong play at this point. It's totally an ownership question. If he's 15%, I'm going to feel good about that. 25 is probably too high, and seeing a lot of Al Horford tends to be bad for a player like Bobby Portis. But that being said, he's a super productive guy, price and opportunity. He's still going to rank out very well, but I would not go nuts. He does not rank for me compared next to Horford himself, who just got a cookie here, so I really like Horford. But Rondo as well would still project well better than Portis. So that degree of exposure to me would be inappropriate. But I do think guessing he only comes in that like 15% range, yes, I'd want to exceed that.
One lineup on FanDuel, would you go Davis and Horford or Davis and Sabonis? Damn it, why do they do just Horford or Sabonis for one lineup on FanDuel?
Well, there are two, big power forwards. I would probably have them, or I would play Davis and Horford probably in my first lineup. I'm giant fans of those players. I would probably try to differentiate elsewhere. I don't have a problem if you turn one into Sabonis. I don't have a problem if you turn one into Kuzma, because it's really good on FanDuel because of how chalky those power forward plays are going to be. You're going to get super bargain underpriced Kyle Kuzma, who does have a very big upside at like $3,900 or something. It's really how much time they give him at the 3. Like I think there's a chance he still gets like 24, 25 minutes, and non-LeBron Kuzma 24, 25 minutes makes me kind of warm.
Let's see. This one I think is still up in the air. Sebi G asking any thoughts on TJ Warren?
Nothing specifically. You understand, of course, the matchup is supreme. So I do think looking his way is a very intelligent way to start, building out your roster. So generically, I think he's in a good spot. But beyond that, no real insight from the last game. They're pretty bad at guarding just about every position on that team. So Depot being back in made him from someone I would have mentioned and talk about for a while to not overly interested. But if you have, 10, 12, 20% TJ Warren, I think that feels appropriate.
Let's see. We are locked now, but let's see if there are any relevant questions. Some of these still going to be up in the air, so I'll try to get them out there, assuming these people are playing on DraftKings, where you will have the late swap, or SuperDraft, which also does have late swap as well. Caldwell Pope, Avery Bradley, or Danny Green, if you're going to the Lakers Flotsam, which of those three would you want?
I would probably play Avery Bradley. I'm not going to play Danny Green because he's coming off the big game, and we will check later, but I expect that to make the differential between his ownership and Bradley and KCP's inappropriately tilted for their actual likelihood of banging the upside. So for me, it would probably be Bradley over KCP nominally, and then Danny Green. I don't dislike Danny Green whatsoever, but just based on the fact that I expect the ownership to be basically double the other two in the my ownership is currently quite bad. The top of my head ownership is decent. My projection, my actual algorithm I built is pretty wretched, but I do think you will have Danny Green well higher than those other two, just because he happened to just have a very nice game. And because he is generically viewed as a better player. Avery Bradley, the narrative is, he can't rebound anymore, and he's not the guy he was, and Danny Green is, solid defensive piece, world champion, coming off a big game, steals and blocks, makes 3-pointers. KCP is like, get rid of that contract. So I'll probably go with one of the two guys who have the negative opinion because I think it moves ownership very slightly. But that's let's do some ownership. We have right?
We just
have the one.
So let me pull these shoot out. And also I'm getting some behind the scenes feedback here just to try to make the case better for SuperDraft moving forward, because we will have the SuperDraft show tomorrow, but really does behoove you guys to play on there. And I try to give the honestly, they are a sponsor. Obviously, they help us pay for things here. But more importantly, they've had a lot of overlay. And Tom, one of our guys behind the scenes, who's a really sharp player, who's also pretty smart about the other things. Obviously, the guy who runs a site like Awesemo, going to know a lot of these things. But just as a player himself, there's $2,700 in free money in their prize pool today. Again, 2,274 entries in there, $12 an entry. Prize pool of $30,000 they're guaranteeing. So just free money going to people just for putting a lineup in. And that's what's happening there every day. If you're a new player, there's more edge to you on new sites. There's more overlay on SuperDraft than anywhere else you will find right now, because they are a new site. They want to get you guys on there. So take advantage of it for yourself as much as for us, but really more for yourself. Go to superdraft.io and use that promo code Awesemo10. Again, $10 free with no deposit, $20 if you deposit under $100, and $30 if you deposit over $100 right now at superdraft.io with that promo code Awesemo10. All right, ownership game, Eddie. Who's your guesses for number one here? And it is somebody who is very highly owned. That's a spoiler I'll give you.
Al Horford.
How much?
I think we had 50 last I looked. I had it, I think, closer to 57 is what I ran. So I will go with my incredibly crappy ownership algorithm making its virgin debut today and go with 57.
Oh, if you can trust anybody, you can trust the Virgin, as we all know. 61% Al Horford. So that is a lot of Al Horford. Would you have had more or less?
I don't know. That's building out. Like, I still build a couple lineups today, but I don't, get into the full MME. So it would be tougher to really guesstimate. That doesn't seem like a crazy number. And FanDuel, I would expect it to be even higher, but that feels about right. It's 60 is a big number, so like maybe 55, but something needs to go weird for him not to get there at his current price. Like, something needs to go really. If he has a bad game, he'll get 30. Like he just projects extremely well for a player at, like, we were talking about 3 shooting guards I really like. They basically all cost the same amount as Horford. They all project for like 9 points less. I mean, it is a massively good price play, getting 8x at a guy at a medium price. So I'd had a lot. That's talk I feel pretty good about. And there is like a giant upside. You can get 55 out of Horford here. So I don't know. Like, even if he gets 30, that might be good enough. And that seems very likely. So I would have had a lot of Horford. That is the chalk I feel more comfortable with.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I'm above the field on Al Horford. I'm a little bit under 70, and I just felt really confident about him able to do it. Seeing Awesemo's projection as well, right in line with the other ones that I create and the ones that I respect. I feel like it's a nice spot for Horford, and If he bombs out and Norvell Pell puts up 50, then we can all cry together. Tobias Harris, number 2 on 52%. I won't make you guess this one. How does Daddy feel about that? I haven't gotten to say the Daddy thing because Josh hates the Daddy game now.
Really?
For whatever reason, I think it's an Eddie exclusive game, but Tobias Harris at 52%. Daddy, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would have thought less than that. That's probably a little high for me. I think some of that for me, again, that's a DraftKings number. FanDuel, the positional lack of flexibility and a better price, that number would have felt about right to me. 52, a little bit high. Some of that turns into, various shares of SGA or Chris Paul for me. But just because, it's a really strong play. Knicks, I like playing down at the 4. I like, you can, Bobby Portis being out there. There's all kinds of good things about it. So again, a little more than I'd have, but I'm fairly ambivalent on that.
All right, got another Sixer here up top. I guess not a surprise given there's only one game, but Josh Richardson behind the rest of the guys here, 27.3%. How does Daddy feel about that? I'm over it.
Shout out to our ownership, by the way, which I think you just said had him at 27 or 28. So good job, ownership, getting it right on the nose there. Yeah, that feels about right. Probably for me, nominally high. Knowing it, I would turn some of it into both Schroeder and Bogdanovich, who I expect to be lower owned. And obviously, we all have projected extremely similarly between you, me, and Alex. So I imagine I would have less purely as the referencing those other plays, but I don't think he's a bad play by any means. So.
Yeah, I just don't ever mind having more when there's such a big hole with no Simmons and no Embiid in there against the Knicks team who plays slow but doesn't defend. Like, I feel like Josh can certainly have a nice day here.
You thought they didn't defend before. They took out Taj Gibson and put in Bobby Portis. I may have underestimated the significance of that.
Yeah, unless Bobby's punching everybody in the face, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for him to stop anything there. Shake Milton at 23%. How does Daddy feel about that?
I'd add less than that. Don't mind him at all, but as more guard value opened up, that's a bit too much of an exposure for me. You're not going to get the efficiency we got in that last game. I think the upside is a little bit muted relative to all those other guys we talked about, and they're $500, $600, $900 more. I think collectively, I would like him even at his discount less than those players. So 23% on Shake feels a little high for me, but again, very possibly getting 34, 37 minutes again against the Knicks. I wouldn't panic if I had 23 or whatever percent you just said, Shake Milton, but I would have ended up with less than that for those reasons.
You're just a super volatile player who can be good and then disappear per minute, and that's a kind of risk of a guy like Shake
role
Milton.
In the rotation is like you can get Burks taking some of that time, you can get Jay Rich running point and them going big, you can get all sorts of weird things can happen in this spot. So minutes not as secure as the other players we're talking about.
Bobby Portis got up to 18%. How would you feel about that?
I think that's what I said. That was the number in my head. I said 17 or 18, or I may have said high in the teens. That's about where that should be. He's a really productive player in a really difficult spot on a team that is literally going through seizures as far as their lineup goes, counting that last game. So I have no idea what to expect, but I can't even remember his DraftKings price, 41, whatever. At a price at around $4,000, there's a giant upside there if he plays, 28 minutes. So that's about where that number should be. That feels about right.
Yep, and you were right with 4,100. So don't ever question yourself, Eddie. If there's anything I can teach you, a man who needs confidence, be confident, Eddie. Believe in you.
Someone hit me with that. Someone hit me with that yesterday. I shared a 1-minute snippet of me singing karaoke on Twitter a while ago, and then my family shared the full 5-6 minute video, which had generally gotten good, feedback. And this one guy's, dude, sing with confidence was the only thing he said. And I was like, oh, I'm trying to take it as a compliment, but I was like, kind of hurt my feelings a little bit.
It's one of those things too, where you can't get a read on somebody's confidence from a video. Maybe he wanted to see more theatrical performance where people could construe his confidence.
Well, I wanted to. What he didn't know is actually I was a good foot taller than the normal vocalist for that band at the time. So I had to keep the microphone very, very still or there was wicked feedback. So I was stuck in this pose.
You're hunching over, slouching a little bit. So you look like you're, I got it.
I couldn't, if I'd have started doing my, put it on the end, swinging around like a bola, it would have gone poorly.
Little did he know you were just a consummate professional who didn't want to break a mic while you were performing.
We'll go with that. Yeah.
People on Twitter don't get sometimes. Julius Randle, 15%. I really didn't get much Randle today. Just didn't pop for me at all. I think the number seems fair.
I would have rather played Elf on that team if I was going to go there, especially with the changes of Harris down to the 4 and Horford down to the 5. I would rather go to Elf at their prices. So I imagine Elf is whatever 8-10%. So I would rather have that than 15 on Randall. But it's 15 on Randall feels fine for me. It's still a net positive for him not having Embiid out there, not having Simmons out there helps everyone on the Knicks. So on a 4-game slate, that's not a crazy ownership. I'm fine with it.
Mitchell Robinson at 11% closes out our double-digit own guys. So we could burn through the rest. But how do you feel about Mitchell coming off the big game against a team that's terrible versus centers? Now he's got a team that's much better versus centers today with 11%.
Yeah, I love him. One of the reasons I might not have gotten to like 61% Horford is the fact that now there's a very good chance of him getting like 30 minutes of Mitch Robinson is going to be like, I don't have anything up in front of me. I'm sitting back for our game here. But if you look at Mitch Robinson's game logs, dude produces. Good matchups, bad matchups, whatever. He may not get minutes, but when he gets minutes, guy produces. I don't know how many. I will top of my head that he has scored at least a fantasy point a minute in 8 of his last 10 games. Wouldn't shock me if it was 9 or 10. Like he's really, really productive when he gets the time. With Taj gone, it's pretty likely he's going to get the time. And Bobby Portis can get clowned anyway, so you could get 35 minutes of Mitch here. But even if he got 30, he would clock out really nicely for me. So one of the reasons I think I would get to less than that Al Horford, even though he feels like a brilliant play, is the fact that directly pivoting to Mitch makes a lot of sense.
A little less foul prone lately, but that might just be me kind of eyeball testing it. But I feel like Naz Reid has replaced him in the guy who, in terms of like, oh my God, you were going to foul every second you were on the court. So good for Mitchell, stabilizing a little. Furkan Korkmaz 7. I'll just burn through these guys. Furkan Korkmaz 7%. Alfred Payton at 6. How much would you have had if you knew he was going to be at 6?
15 maybe. Wouldn't have gone crazy, but that's, one of those edge players. If I knew he was going to be at 6, I would be happier going there than spending a little more, for example, on Chris Paul, SGA, those guys. That would have been a preference for me.
All right. Here are the rest of the guys. I'm just going to steam through them. Got Glenn Robinson, 4%, Alec Burks, 3.3, RJ Barrett, 2.3, Kyle O'Quinn, 1.1. Would you have had that much, knowing or feeling how you felt about Pell getting the run above him?
Yeah, I ranked him because I would have had a non-zero share on a 4-game slate, and you can get, foul trouble on Horford, or they can limit Horford's minutes. And so 1% would I have had that much? 150 lineups, that'd be, less than 2. So I think I'd have had 2 O'Quinns, but I would have had around that percent. I'd had 1 or 2 Kyle O'Quinns and 4 Norvel Pells. Neither of them would have been big priorities. I think I ranked O'Quinn at double Ds and Norvel Pell at D and C, but there you go.
Mo Harkless at 0.9%. I got more than that. I'm only playing 50 entries today. Just super cheap. I don't mind him, but how do you feel about
You
Mo
got
Harkless?
at least twice that.
Yeah. I mean, he's not an exciting player. One thing that struck me, his usage is down despite being a Knick now instead of a Clipper, which just makes me laugh. Like this guy just loves to defer, but that's what he's doing. Dennis Smith, 0.4%, Matisse Thybulle, 0.2, Reggie Bullock, 0.1, Damian Dotson, 0.07, Lonzo Trier, 0.06, Norvel Pell, 0.06. I feel like he should have been closer to Kyle O'Quinn. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. Kevin Knox, 0.04, Mike Scott, 0.03.
He says Kevin Knox, 0.04. So he's not even hurt or anything. He's just that bad. 4-game slate, you get 0.04 ownership. Wow, that's got to hurt.
One day he's got to break out. One day.
Minimum price Kevin Knox, every 2,500th lineup.
If you could transport my 3-point shooting ability into anybody's body, I would choose Kevin Knox because I feel like the raw potential's there. He just needs a little more confidence in his stroke.
Can
Maybe
you
he needs
get
to go
buckets?
more karaoke.
Can you shoot?
Oh, I'm going to make, there's a highlight reel on my Instagram of when I had to play a one-on-one game for Barstool, which the Slack has seen before. But no, yeah, I had to play a guy one-on-one, beat him 22-5. And
wow.
Yeah, it was an ugly game because he just like fouled the crap out of me over and over again because it was a blood feud type situation. But
Harris is going off already. Yeah.
There we go. All right, feel good about that. All right, Mike Scott, 0.03, Taj Gibson, 0.03. So Eddie, what did those 0.03 do?
They played themselves.
They did, in fact. So did 0.01% with Ben Simmons and 0.01% for Joel Embiid. So a lot of playing of themselves today. And Frank Ntilikina also at 0.01%. I always screw up his last name. Frankie Smokes, 0.01%.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Eddie, anything you want to hit on? We are done with the Daddy Likes game. Anything you want to promote? Obviously, you're back this weekend with EMAC doing your usual shows where you guys provide really the biggest edge you could find on any slates because of people playing less on the weekends and paying less attention. I think you guys have been doing a great job there. But anything you want to promote?
No, I like that sell that when our competition is bad, EMAC and I are great.
And no, it's really thrive. It's like
I can't do better than that kind of endorsement.
1.5x. But yeah, watch Eddie and EMAC this weekend. Watch the XFL strategy show tomorrow with me and Sal Vetri. We are the premier source of XFL content right now. It was stupid easy to win money in the XFL last week, and I think it'll be comparably stupid again this week. I bet people are going to play a guy who's not even playing. So go and tune in tomorrow. I think it's 11 p.m. West Coast, or 11 a.m. West Coast time, 2 p.m. East Coast time. So tune in to us then. And of course, tomorrow I'll be back with Josh. So watch that as well. But subscribe to the channel so you know whenever we have content coming up, and we'll be back with you guys again soon. So enjoy your nights and good luck.
Super Draft.